You're watching BCTV. We're all about Branford. You're watching BCTV, Branford Government Television, a service of Branford Community Television.
Good evening. My name is Peter Basserman. I'm chairman of the Branford Inland Wetland Commission. Today is December 9th, 2021. It is 7:03 p.m. We have a quorum, so we can move forward. All commissioners that are present are seated, will participate in the deliberations and any decisions reached this evening. BCTV is not recording this evening. Let's see, in terms of the agenda, we have an agenda posted on the town's website in the Dropbox. And the date of the agenda that we're going to be using this evening is December 8th. Yesterday replaces a December 3rd agenda that was posted previously. Let's see, I'll do a call to order, a roll call, identify commissioners first, and then staff. Commissioner Basserman present.
Commissioner Begamon present.
Commissioner Papantonis present.
Melissa's muted.
Commissioner Melissa Finaro is present.
Okay, and now staff.
Real quick, I believe
Richard's
Richard's
also, sorry. Richard's on the call now.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Granolch, I'm unmuted.
Welcome, Dick.
okay, and Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent present.
Abby York, Inland Wetland Associate, present.
And it looks like one of the two new appointees on the commission is present this evening, Melissa Finaro. There is also a new appointee, Commissioner Mark Steinberg. Am I correct? He's not going to be joining us tonight, Abigail?
Correct.
We also are losing a commission member, longtime commission member, Sandy Kraus. She has resigned. Next up is the minutes of approval. As I said, these would be from the, well, I didn't say, but this is from the November 4th, 2021 meeting. Again, copy of these were on the town's website.
This is Commissioner Begamon. On page 2 for 175 Cherry Hill Road. As I recall, those man-made ponds are off. I don't think there are wetlands on that property, and the minutes say that, presentation was made noting the wetlands and the man-made ponds on the property, but I believe they're off the property.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, yes, they are off of the property. Where were you seeing that?
On page 2, and my Dropbox isn't working right now, so let me see if
I see where you, yeah, noting the location of the wetlands and man-made ponds on the property. We can revise that and bring it back for review at the next meeting if you would like. It should say adjacent to the property.
Yeah.
And we, with that, with that amendment, can we approve those minutes?
Yeah, you can do it that way too.
As opposed to, just pushing it off if it's just, is that the only comment from commission members on the minutes of November 4th?
That's the only thing I noted.
Can you make a motion for that so that we can approve that, Clarice?
Sure. I move that we approve the minutes from the November 4, 2021 meeting with the amendment that in discussion of the 175 Cherry Hill Road as noting wetlands and man-made ponds off the property.
Second.
And the correction should be?
So that was with the correction.
Okay.
Commissioner
Is there
Granolch.
a second? I'm sorry, Dick, did you second that?
Yes.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 I guess I should also have noted in the beginning that this meeting is being conducted via Zoom. Okay.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, just to add on to that, because we do have a couple of new faces this evening. If possible, please state your name and title prior to speaking each time, just so that way it's clear who's talking. And also for that motion, can we just clarify, we had the votes for approval. Can you ask about anyone opposed or abstaining to see if that's applicable?
Is there any abstentions or opposition to the motion? Then hopefully the previous vote stands.
All right.
Thank you for picking that up, Jamie. First up is other business, Inland Wetland 210601, 54 and 60 North Main Street, which is the car wash modification request of the permit. Is there somebody here for the applicant?
Yes, good evening, Jim Preddy, Criscolo Engineering. I appreciate staff for kind of pushing us up. We're at zoning right now at the same time. So this project was approved a couple months ago with you folks. There was a site walk and a few meetings, and we got this approved. And subsequent to that, after a couple of planning and zoning meetings, we were asked to kind of revise the circulation on site, and it in total didn't amount to any more disturbed area or more impervious area. So we're within the limits of what we had approved before, but because the plan is different, we were asked to come back and run it through by you guys and make sure that you didn't have any issues with it. I will say that the changes also gave us an opportunity to change some grading, which resulted in us being able to fit some drainage structures that we didn't have in before, which will allow us to actually provide further treatment for stormwater, catch basin in the area of the vacuum spots, and then hydrodynamic separator for what we are catching. So increased water quality since what you guys have approved. Jamie, I could do it if you want, because then I can control the, let's see, you gotta just enable screen sharing.
All right. I think you're able to.
Okay. You can all see this, hopefully. So this is a plan that was approved. We had an entrance here, the car wash tunnel, and then an exit, and then another path for some, we had 11, I think, vacuum spaces, and then another exit. We've consolidated the two exits to one place and moved this in and flipped this basically to get more queuing. So what we have now is something that looks like this. Entrance is a little farther to the right than it was before. We come around the building to provide, now we have 20 spaces stacking through the car wash tunnel and then back out. We've also reduced the number of, as a balance, we've reduced the number of vacuum spaces from 11 down to 7. And but the limits of what was presented and approved the last meeting has not changed. Here is the grading plan, the detention basin in the same spot. These are the basins that I said we were able to add, and we'll have a hydrodynamic separator at the end before it gets into the basin. The stormwater calculations don't change because the impervious surface area hasn't changed. But just to kind of show you the difference, this was the grading plan before. We were kind of right up into the corner over here, and now we're actually pulled back a little bit. I mean, it's not a very big pullback, but the point being, we haven't gone any, we've gone less than what was approved before, with some increased water quality.
This is Commissioner Basserman. Mr. Criscola, is all drying for the car wash done within the context of the building?
That's correct.
There's no hand drying outside?
No, it's this is, and it's one of the things that we're having a hard time explaining to planning and zoning, is that this is very new technology. I mean, they could potentially wash cars at 2 per minute here. The equipment is far more advanced than what everybody's used to. But in any event, there's, I don't remember the number, 11 or 12 drying blades, I guess, if you will, which is what you usually drive through at the end. So the theory being that it's taking far more water off the car than normal coming out of the tunnel. And everything inside the tunnel that gets, onto the floor basically, gets collected and treated through and we've covered this before, but it gets treated through there's 3 oral water separators. Good percentage of it gets reused, and then it connects to the sanitary sewer. So none of the wash water ends up in the stormwater system.
Thank you. I guess one other question that Commissioner Basserman, again, that I didn't raise previously, but I just thought of now is there any storage of chemicals outside of the building?
No storage outside the building. That's what this mechanical room in the back, and there's some storage area in that, but it's all within inside the building.
Thank you. Any other comments from the commission? Given that, Jamie, is this modification, minor enough to be agent approval, or do we need a vote on this change?
The permit was approved by the commission, so I believe that the modification should be reviewed and acted upon by the commission. As it is a modification request, and I do think it is appropriate to consider as a modification, the commission can act on it this evening. I did create a brief staff memo regarding the changes that I can share if you would like, basically outlining a lot of what was just mentioned. So overall limits of disturbance are the same, percent impervious cover remains the same, stormwater improvements have already been mentioned. There are a couple of instances on the landscaping plan where there was some contradiction. So basically I drafted a proposed language to kind of clarify that up. And also there is a tree that is close to the revised limits of pavement that I think may be impacted due to root impacts. And so I just provided language for what should happen in case that tree does need to be removed, essentially calling for the replacement. And then the only other thing I could think of is now that the queuing line for the car wash is adjacent to that wall, which is adjacent to the wetland area, keeping an eye on that area and making sure that there's no trash issues. And that if there were trash issues, that a fence be erected to help prevent any windblown issues or anything like that for impacts to the wetlands.
Commissioner Basserman, have those comments that you just articulated been shared with Mr. Criscolo?
Yes.
Okay. What was it look like for that tree? We look going to be likely to be removed?
I think that there will be significant enough impacts that it will probably have to be removed and replaced. Yeah, I agree.
This is a subject tree in question here. As you can see, about a third of its roots would probably have to get removed or they would be buried. So
okay.
Yeah, there's already pavement on the other side of it, so the root ball is probably lopsided already. So I guess it most likely will have to be replaced.
It's just a one-page staff report here, correct, Jamie?
correct.
I guess, can we adopt this memorandum as part of the record?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, if somebody wanted to make a motion and include the proposed condition language that provided on this memo, they could certainly reference this memo for that.
This is Commissioner Papantonis. I'll make that motion.
Please state the motion, Commissioner Papatonis.
that we adopt the recommendations of the agent in the December 9th, 2021 memorandum regarding the modification request. Regarding the modifications to the landscape plan. Is that sufficient?
Is there a second?
Commissioner Finaro would like to second that.
Any further discussion?
Just to clarify, Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, the motion was to approve the modification request with the condition 1 relative to the plantings.
Right.
Commissioner Begeman, we should just note that this pertains to inland wetland 210601. Right?
Jamie Frederick and wetland agent, good call, Clarice. If both the person that motioned and seconded can indicate whether they accept that friendly amendment.
Commissioner Papantonis, they accept the friendly amendment.
Commissioner Finaro accepts.
Any further discussion?
Commissioner Greenwald, yes.
Commissioner Begeman,
Aye.
Commissioner Finaro,
Aye.
Commissioner Basserman, aye. Did we get everybody?
I don't know if you got me, but I made the motion. Commissioner
Oh, yeah,
Papantonis,
Commissioner
aye.
Papantonis. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Alrighty. We have some applications for receipt this evening. Inland Wetland 211103, 314 Pine Orchard Road, in addition and interior renovations.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, I don't believe anyone's present. I told them they didn't need to be. If somebody is, feel free to interrupt me. However, this is a pretty minor project. It's a residential single-family house. They're looking to put an addition on the front of the house. I'll just pull up a GIS map real quick. So the house is here. They're looking to put an addition along the front of the house. There's 2 driveways, and then there's this water course wetland area, which is the area of concern. So I'm just looking for a couple of revisions to primarily the erosion control plan, and some additional information for the application, but it seems like a good candidate for agent approval. Happy to answer any questions or concerns, or if the commission wants more information.
The distance between the, I don't even know what direction this is. The closest point for the addition to the water course was how many feet?
I didn't write it down. I think it's about 70 or 80 feet.
And the construction vehicles would come in on the driveway on the right, and I assume nothing would be going back and forth on the driveway on the left.
Correct. So the property line is right along the driveway. So they're going to be using the driveway for access. This driveway is, this property here is actually the Pine Orchard golf course property.
Okay. I guess I would agree. It looks like a good candidate for agent approval. Does anybody disagree?
No, sounds good to me, Commissioner Greenwald.
Commissioner Begeman, okay with it? Agent approval.
Commissioner Papantonis, okay with it?
Commissioner Finaro was okay with it.
Sounds good. Thank you. Inland Wetland 211201, 56 Stony Creek Road, installation of footings for an equipment platform.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. This is a pretty minor project. It is very close to the wetland though, so I told the applicant that it would need to come to the commission to determine whether or not it could be considered agent approval. The applicant, I believe, is present this evening. I will screen share the site plan. So this is the nest, which the commission has seen a couple times over the last couple years. And what they're looking to do at this time is put a platform on the rear of the building for mechanicals. And I believe it's going to be placed over some mechanicals. So this is already a disturbed area. There's no clearing or anything that needs to happen. It's 8 footings that they'll be putting in, and then the structure, but it is about 10 feet away from the wetlands. So if you have any further questions, like I said, I believe the applicant is present.
This Commissioner Basserman, I guess, are any of the equipment, is any of the equipment on the platform exhausting fumes or anything toward the wetland?
Hi, this is Lee Small from the Nest Shoreline Campus. The equipment on the platform is about 6'8" to 7 feet above the ground. And we will be looking to place 8 footings in that area. The equipment is the exhaust for a hood fan, the kitchen hood fan, and the makeup air for the hood. So the exhaust goes straight up 4 feet above the roof. So it is straight up, not pitched towards the wetland. And the makeup air obviously sucks air in to the kitchen. So
Got it.
nothing will be directed towards the wetland.
Any other comments from the commission?
Commissioner Bergman, just a question. The footings are being put in by hand?
Yes, there'll be no equipment brought back there. They'll be dug by hand.
Thank you.
Do we like this for agent approval?
I think given the scope of the activity and doing it by hand, I would be comfortable doing it administratively if the commission's okay with that. I do have one other point just regarding general site compliance that I would like to touch base on once the commission's done with questions regarding the project at hand.
Commissioner Greenwald, I think agent approval is fine.
Commissioner Basserman, I would agree.
Commissioner Papantonis, I would agree.
Commissioner Bergman, agree.
Commissioner Finaro, agree.
Okay.
All right,
Your
so
question,
Jamie
Jamie?
Frederick and the wetland agent. The one thing I want to bring up is I don't really. So back in 2020, I believe, or maybe it was earlier this year, there was a modification to the approval for activities outside of the wetland area. And on that site plan, 3 bridges crossing, there's kind of like a water course that goes through the wetland area. And there's 3 bridges shown on that plan. They were not indicated in the revisions that were proposed. They are on site now. I don't see them really having a significant impact on the wetlands. They are prefab structures. I think they're probably maybe even a benefit because it prevents those areas from becoming muddy and the vegetation from getting torn up. I just want clarification from the commission, given the fact that they were on the site plan. Is the commission okay with saying that those bridges are approved at this point? So that way we can kind of close that out in our files and just acknowledge that those are part of the site plan at this time.
Commissioner Basserman, what, there's fact that they're shown on the plan. Didn't we approve that as part of the original documentation for the permit?
So the original permit back in 2019 showed 1 bridge, and then recently the commission approved a modification, and it was proposed that all of the activity was outside of the wetland area, and the application fee was based on all of the activity being outside of the wetland area. So based off of that, it's kind of contradictory to the 3 bridges. shown in the wetland area. This plan was received, I believe, the day before or the day of the meeting, so I did not have a lot of time to fully dive in and review it. However, since that timeframe, the applicant did submit another application for activity in the wetland, which they ended up withdrawing. So essentially, they have paid the application fee. So I think at this point, it's just a matter of
Record.
confirming that the commission's okay with the 3 bridges. It's less, it's not a lot of square footage. It doesn't meet the threshold for requiring mitigation or anything like that. I just want to be able to clarify for the record that that is indeed part of the approved plan. And I think it would be reasonable given the fact that they are in fact shown on a plan that was approved by the commission.
Commissioner Basserman, are the 3 bridges that exist in the locations as demonstrated on this plan?
Approximately.
Close enough?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm okay.
I'm okay with the 3 bridges.
To clarify for commissioners that are not familiar with this site, that area where the bridges are, it's wetland, but it's all lawn. It's not like any vegetation other than lawn is being impacted by their placement.
Commissioner Fenaro was okay with this plan.
Commissioner Papantonis, I'm okay with it.
Commissioner Bagman, I'm okay.
All right, thank you.
Inland Wetland 21-12-02, 82 Mill Plain Road, a footing drain installation.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. Another project that might be appropriate for agent approval. Let me scroll to the site plan real quick. It's my understanding that homeowner is looking to replace the concrete slab within their garage, and they want to put a footing drain essentially discharging towards a water course from the rear of the property. Let me see. So it's a footing drain, so it would be groundwater. There would be no drain within the garage, so no water from within the garage would be going through this footing drain. They are looking to discharge. There's a water course along the rear of their property, which becomes piped and is part of the town drainage system. So given the proximity of it to the water course, I wanted to bring it to the commission, see if you're okay with me doing it administratively, see if you're okay with me waiving the wetland delineation requirement. I do have a couple of pictures of the site just for reference. Let me see. And I believe that a representative of the contracting team is present in case the commission has any questions regarding the scope of the project.
This is Commissioner Basserman, I guess, what's the treatment at the end of that pipe before it goes into the water course? Are we dissipating the energy at all? I look at it, something that, oh, there we go.
Yep, 18-inch by 36-inch energy dissipator at pipe outlet.
Okay.
There is an existing pipe on the property that discharges directly to the water course. I told them that particularly if they were looking for an agent review, I would be looking for some sort of energy dissipator and for the pipe to outlet before reaching the actual water course.
Commissioner Fenaro, I was just wanting to confirm this is rainwater.
This would be groundwater that, so they're essentially looking to put a layer of crushed stone underneath the new concrete slab. And this pipe would be taking any water from within that crushed stone and directing it away from the garage.
Bill Lyons from Lyons General
Oh.
Contractors. The existing floor slab is cracked because it's not well supported. And so the idea would be to remove that and a little bit of the soil underneath the slab, install crushed stone, compact that, and then pour a new concrete floor on top of that. So this pipe is to drain the sub-slab area in case groundwater should come up to that elevation.
And this is Commissioner Basserman, and the existing pipe drains what?
There's a pre-existing yard drain at the end of the driveway,
Approximately in this
right,
location.
right
here.
about there, yes.
Okay. So just for clarification purposes, is this a separate parallel run?
Yes,
Okay,
there's very little pitch. That's a really flat lot and it's quite wet and there's very little pitch to the back there. We'll be lucky if we have 1/8 of an inch over that distance per foot.
pretty straightforward from my standpoint. Any commissioner have a issue with this?
No, agent approval sounds good to me, Commissioner Reynolds.
Commissioner Papantonis, I'm okay with agent approval on this.
Commissioner Bagamon's okay with agent approval.
Commissioner Basserman, ditto.
Commissioner Finaro, okay with the approval.
Okay, that sums up the easy ones. We have an application for review, Inland Wetland 210801, 175 Cherry Hill Road, an 11 lot subdivision. Looks like we've got a fee assessment to review and a request for a fee reduction.
Amy Frederick, Inland Wetland Agent. The commission has seen this application quite a few times at this point. At the last meeting, the commission requested some more information regarding phasing and long-term maintenance in particular. A phasing plan has been submitted. I did have some outstanding questions, which were responded to in a comment letter. So I did do a staff report and draft some conditions for consideration based off of the information that we have. So as the chairman pointed out, the commission also has a decision to make regarding the fee. So there's two different ways that the commission has assessed fees relative to subdivision applications in the past and present. The two options are subdivision without regulated activity and subdivision with regulated activity. Recently, the commission has been approving things as subdivision without regulated activity. Granted, the recent applications the commission has reviewed have had all of the improvements essentially on individual lots with no shared infrastructure, such as the shared road and the stormwater basins, which are proposed with this application. So the question is it subdivision with regulated activity or subdivision without regulated activity? And if you determine it's subdivision with regulated activity, the applicant is requesting that the commission consider a fee reduction. They have requested a fee reduction of to be reduced down to the same fee as a subdivision without regulated activity, given that all of the proposed activity is greater than 100 feet from the offsite wetlands identified. And they also recommended possibly looking at lots 7 and 8, because those lots have upland review area on them as a way of calculating the area or the area of disturbance should the commission do the subdivision with regulated activity assessment. I have a couple of additional thoughts on possible ways the commission consider a fee reduction if the commission wants more information on that, but we can also hand it over to the applicant for what presentation they want to provide.
Commissioner Basserman, before we do that, help me understand, do we have this issue because our regulations are not as clear as they could be in this area, or is there something else at play here?
Jamie Frederick, Inland Wetland Agent. I think that our regulations are not as clear as they could be. My interpretation would be that it would be subdivision with regulated activity. However, I could also make an argument that some of the recent applications that were approved as subdivision without regulated activity or subdivision with regulated activity. I think one of the things that the commission should consider is if you're conditioning the way that you're approving the permit, then you're basically identifying that you're considering these regulated activities. I think given the fact that all the activities outside 100 feet certainly opens the door for considering a fee reduction request. I think that we need to work on clarifying that in the regulations so that the commission doesn't have to assess this on a case-by-case basis.
This is Commissioner Papantonis. I have a question because it seems like 2 of the lots are within the 100 feet. Am I correct?
2 of the single-family residential lots proposed are within the 100 feet. And then there's also a field which they propose to mow to a maximum height of 6 inches. That would also be within 100 feet of the wetland.
Right. And that's going to be some sort of an association, correct?
That is my understanding.
Okay.
Maybe it's appropriate, this is Commissioner Bassman, maybe it's appropriate now for the applicant to enlighten us on this project.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. My name is Jesse Langer of Updike, Kelly and Spellacy, and I now represent the applicant BC Investment Properties LLC. Also present for this meeting is Bruno Chacon, who's the member of BC Investment, James DeMeo, who's a licensed engineer with Giuliano and Associates, whom I believe you have some experience with on this project. And then George Logan, who's a certified soil scientist, among other credentials with REMA. And I'm going to yield to Mr. DeMeo, but I just wanted to make a few brief points. BC Investments has made several supplemental filings, most recently as of yesterday, to be as responsive as possible to the commission and its staff. And we think these filings, driven by the input and questions from the commission and its staff, make clear that the proposed activities do not constitute regulated activities. As provided by Mr. Logan's soils report, there are no wetlands or watercourses on the site, and there are no activities proposed within the 100-foot buffer, which encroaches a bit on the eastern side of the property. And as stated by Jamie, a lot of that space will actually be open space. And so based on the regulations, at least from my perspective, the potential applicability of this being a regulated activity would fall within the subsection 2 of the definition of regulated activities, which pertains to stormwater. Giuliano and Associates has designed the subdivision through ES measures and controls, so there'd be no direct or indirect impact to any of the wetlands or the wetland buffer area. And this includes stormwater discharge, which my understanding, and Mr. DeMeo can opine, that there wouldn't be a discharge unless there's a severe storm event, over the 100-year storm. And so that's basically the position that we've presented in the fee waiver. I'd also just briefly like to make a couple comments about the proposed conditions should the commission approve the application, which we hope you do. Proposed condition 2 concerns the individual permits for lots 7 and 8. And those are the 2 lots on the eastern side that have a bit of the 100-foot buffer encroaching upon them. And right, and so we would, although it's true that you do have a bit of an encroachment from the buffer, as previously mentioned, there's no activities proposed within the 100-foot buffer, and there'd be no stormwater issues. And so perhaps what we would be amenable to would be a review by the wetlands agent of the final build plans for lots 7 and 8 to ensure no disturbance in the 100-foot buffer, as opposed to requiring an actual application and approval. Similarly, proposed condition 7 relates to weekly inspection reports. concerning soil erosion sedimentation. And from the applicant's perspective, we don't think that it's necessary for a weekly report, given the other conditions that have been included, since there'll be no stormwater discharge into the 100-foot buffer or any wetlands. And so there aren't any other issues that the applicant has with the proposed conditions, again, assuming the commission were to approve this. I know there were some questions from earlier meetings regarding the ownership of the proposed detention basins in the open space areas, and I'll confirm that there will be a homeowners association whose purpose from a wetlands perspective will be to maintain and protect the detention ponds and open space. The only thing I'll say about the fee, and I don't want to regurgitate the letter, I would just emphasize that given these circumstances and the robust E&S measures that have been proposed, we don't think that that this should be considered a regulated activity. And so with that, unless you have any questions of me, I'd rather yield to Mr. DeMeo, who can provide you some additional information. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. James DeMeo, Giuliano Associates. Won't dive too crazy, as we're all pretty familiar with this project at this point. A couple things that I would like to just touch on, as Attorney Langer just discussed. In terms of the weekly inspections, we do have some pretty robust S&E measures. Not to mention that, which would include, water bars along the emergency access road, along with the swale, to capture that water. We will have silt fences upgrading of all disturbed areas. And one of the bigger things that I want to make sure that we understand too is, we did submit a phased S&E plan, as we discussed in the previous meeting, where phase 1 is essentially construction of the road and detention basins, along with all the stormwater catch basins and piping network. And we'll install the road down to binder. That way it'll be stabilized and won't continue to erode. So by that point, we'll have our 2 detention basins in, which will also act as sediment chambers, especially during construction, as well as, all the catch basins and everything will be stabilized. And then there's, after the roadway is installed, then now we're only talking about individual lots. So now we're only talking about maintaining the S&E measures on one of the 11 lots, for the construction of the house and the driveway. So the impacts are much more minimized at that point. As previously mentioned, the 2 lots that do have the upland review area in the lot areas would be 7 and 8. However, we again are not proposing any activity in these lots or any disturbances within that regulated area. All of our disturbances will be out. Our silt fences will be placed at least, a foot or 2 out of that area to preserve that area during construction. Just to also give you an idea too, we don't think that there isn't any impact to any of the surrounding wetlands due to the fact that even during the 100-year storms, our detention basins will not discharge any water. So for instance, the southern detention basin during the 100-year storm, sorry, apparently I can't zoom in. The 100-year storm elevation for the southern basin is 138.45, and the high level spillway elevation is 138.85. meaning we have 0.4 feet before water even starts discharging. And that's after a 100-year storm, which is what all stormwater designs are held to. The northern basin, we have a spillway at 164.03 and the 100-year storm at 163.54. Essentially half a foot is what we have there. So again, there's significant storage in these basins to help counteract any negative impacts to any of the surrounding wetlands. To give you also an idea, this is the watershed map. The two basins will be discharging towards the regional water authority property, which, as we know, there's wetlands 500 feet away, and I want to say it's like 300 feet away in this direction. Again, we're reducing the amount of flow, or reducing the water, because we're capturing it, as well as, there are significant steep slopes at that point. So we're minimizing the potential for erosion in these areas. And then there's the three ponds to the south, to the south, and essentially same concept. We are capturing additional areas so that we're not negatively impacting these wetlands as well. In terms of just some of the comments that Jamie has raised, I won't go through all of them, but most of them were just clarification. Some were minor errors on my part in terms of clerical errors, including calling out the zoning enforcement officer instead of the inland wetlands officer, or things like that. All of those have been revised in the narratives and resubmitted. The only things that have not been resubmitted are minor changes and callouts on the maps themselves, but I did verbally state what they would be. One of the major concerns was the limit of disturbances for each phase. Essentially, it's the limit of silt fence. There will be no disturbances outside of the silt fence during any of these phases. So for phase one, it's again within the proposed silt fence that is pictorially represented, and phase two, the same. Aside from that, there's requests for a detail for energy dissipator. That's not a problem, and pretty much that's about it. So if there's any specific questions, I'm more than happy to answer them, but we have heard a lot about this project already. So
Commissioner Basserman, Jamie, is a weekly report something that the commission has had a practice of including as one of the conditions and other projects of the subdivision?
Jamie Frederick, in the Wetland Agent. It is in certain cases. I don't know that it's required or necessarily appropriate for this one. I erred on the side of caution, and I threw everything that I thought the commission might want in there, because it's easier for the commission to see the language. So while all of those conditions are in the staff report, I'm not saying they're necessarily all required. They're just things I want the commission to consider and determine whether or not they apply to this application.
Can I ask you this? What is the, Commissioner Bassman, what is the biggest reason or largest concern on why the commission would look to consider this as a regulated activity as opposed to a not regulated activity?
Jamie Frederick, in the Wetland Agent. So I think there's kind of two ways of looking at it. One is the application fee, and the other is, I think, how much you're conditioning the approval. I think if you're approving it as a subdivision without regulated activity, there's some room to put some conditions to say, okay, we've determined it's subdivision without regulated activity, given the information you provided and that you've represented X, Y, and Z. And subdivision with regulated activity would be, I'm gonna steal the screen share real quick, and I'm just gonna, I'm gonna pull up the definition of regulated activity real quick. So subdivision with regulated activity would be if the commission determines that the activity falls specifically within the scope of regulated activity as defined in the regulations. Means any operation within or use of a wetland or watercourse involving removal or disposal of material or any obstruction, construction, alteration, or pollution of such a wetland or watercourse, but shall not include the activities specified in section 4 of these regulations, which are the exemptions. Furthermore, any grubbing, filling, grading, paving, excavating, constructing, depositing, or removing of material, clearing, cutting, alteration, damaging of vegetation, living or dead, placement of decorative structures, electrical or mechanical equipment, including but not limited to fountains, aerators, or geothermal coils, or discharging of stormwater on land within 100 feet measured horizontally from the boundary of any wetland or watercourse is a regulated activity. The agency may rule that any activity that alters the existing rate or quality of any stormwater discharge conveyed to a regulated area or upland review area is likely to impact or affect wetlands or watercourses and is a regulated activity. The agency may extend the upland review area to the top of slope if steep slopes are or erodible soils are present. And lastly, the agency may rule that any activity located within such upland review area or in any other non-wetland or non-watercourse area is likely to impact or affect wetlands or watercourses and is a regulated activity. And while we're kind of on this topic, I just want to take a look at that condition number 2 that was discussed before. Condition number 2 requiring permits for lots 7 and 8 is only recommended if the commission determines that the application is an application for subdivision without regulated activity. And it's a very standard practice for the commission to require permits for a handful of the lots when they do approve an application as a subdivision without regulated activity. If the commission determines that it is a subdivision with regulated activity, then that permit for those activities would be approved at this time, so long as the site plan, when they propose to construct, aligns with what is in the subdivision plans.
This is Commissioner Papantonis. So let me
Go ahead.
just, so what we have then is 2 lots that are within the regulated area and an area that's going to become an association property that is also within the regulated area. Right?
Yes,
So,
yes.
so it's,
Yeah.
okay, so it's a little more than just 2 lots.
But there's no disturbances being proposed. They're just in that area.
Jamie Frederick, inland wetland agent. Yeah, so the limits of disturbance shown on the site plan shows the activity ending at the upland review area or further away from the wetlands.
Okay.
However,
I have another question.
Yep.
This is Commissioner Papantonis again. And then I did read also about erodible soil and the access road, right? Does that also fall within or not with the regulated activity?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, I think that's up to the commission to decide. You would basically have to connect that to likely impact to a wetland area.
And how close is that to the wetland? Because doesn't that go into Cherry Hill? I mean, doesn't that abut the water company property?
Jamie Frederick, inland wetland agent. There is regional water property across the street. And there are, I'm not sure which way the drainage, I believe there is a catch basin near where that access drive is. Do you have that on the site plan?
Yep, working on it. Sorry. The catch basin is here. The emergency access drive is here. The wetlands are actually kind of in this direction. George would have a better idea of distances from the property itself. But in terms of erosion on this, we're installing water bars to prevent erosion along this emergency access way, as well as installing a swale so that we won't have erosion in that area, if that was a concern.
Commissioner Basserman, Jamie, would you put up those, that section from our regulations defining regulated activity?
Commissioner Beck, before, or while you're getting those ready, the construction vehicles will come in what direction? Are they using that emergency access area, or are they coming? I think,
Sorry, you cut out. Can you repeat the beginning part of it? What vehicles?
Commissioner Begman, so when this is being constructed, which way are the construction vehicles coming in? I think maybe Commissioner Papatonis is thinking, right, that from Cherry Hill up, that's where you go up. And if there's a lot of movement with trucks, et cetera, on an road that isn't, I don't know what state the road is going to be in, you know, so if you can explain how construction is going to be done, because that's the area with the steepest grade and might have the most impact.
So the intention is to use Cherry Hill and this access road, emergency access road, as the main entrance onto the site for construction vehicles. The maximum slope of this road is 10%. Again, it's going to have to be maintained throughout construction. It's going to be finished with stone, so it's almost going to become a giant anti-tracking apron. Is essentially what it's going to end up being. So it will be stabilized, but due to the amount of trucks, it will need to be repaired, and that is part of the maintenance as well for this project.
Jamie, do we have any, this is Commissioner Bassman, do we have any input from town council on this regulated versus unregulated decision?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, I think it's up to the commission. The commission did not ask for town council feedback on this. I think that there is room with past precedents for the commission to make their decision either way. You just need to state your rationale for what you're deciding.
Another question. So in the future, when it's the homeowner's job to keep maintaining, that area, will it make a difference whether it was a non-regulated or regulated activity at the time of construction?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, are you referring to lot 7 and 8 specifically?
I'm thinking, Commissioner Began, I'm thinking about the homeowners have to maintain this property in the future. The homeowners association, and does it matter whether it's a regulated or non-regulated activity for them? Does it carry on into the future, or is it just while it's being?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. So I think generally to the scope that the commission's looking at it right now, you're looking at it a bit closer than you would for an individual homeowner, because it's a large portion of the site that's going to be disturbed all at once. There's the drainage going in, there's the roadway, there are other wetlands and water courses adjacent to Cherry Hill that they're going to be going past as well. So I think it's the scope of the overall project. Down the road, once the houses are built, I think the commission would only look at activities that are actually within 100 feet of a wetland or water course, with maybe the exception if there's some activity proposed on a steep slope, such as like the activity that was temporarily proposed regarding the drainage ditch, which it was further looked at and kind of assessed to be more of a impact to fix than to just ensure that there's not a concentration of flow going to that area in the future. So I would say, generally speaking, if a homeowner wanted to say put up a shed or an above ground pool in their backyard, as long as it's not in the 100-foot upland review area, they wouldn't need to come to the inland wetland agency. If there are some trees in, just to kind of, if there are trees in the conservation area that they want to have removed, if it's a hazard, the commission has documentation in the past acknowledging that hazard trees should be removed to the point where they're no longer a hazard. However, if there's like a healthy tree they want to remove, then that might need to come back to the commission as well if it's in the 100-foot upland review area.
This is Commissioner Basserman. If in fact this goes forward as unregulated activity and things go bump in the night, erosion controls aren't maintained and the like. If we have declared it as an unregulated activity, what are we having our hands tied behind our back in terms of fixing the problems that occurred if things don't go as planned?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, I don't think so, because a violation is always a violation. So, and I do think that the commission is, if they do subdivision without regulated activity, they're acknowledging based on the documentation provided. So you're still expecting for all of the provisions that were outlined in the materials to occur. If they don't occur, then they could result in conditions that would result in a violation. However, yeah.
Commissioner Basserman, again, if we look at the last 2-3 years of subdivisions, which ones went forward as unregulated activities?
So if you look at the last 2 to 3 years, subdivision applications have generally been approved as subdivision without regulated activity, and the commission, as a condition of approval, has specified which lots specifically they want to come back for a permit. And generally speaking, it's all lots that contain upland review area within the confines of the lot.
Jesse
Which is
Langer.
why I made the recommendation for condition number 2.
Sorry. I'm sorry, Jamie, to interrupt. I just want to make a quick point that to be a regulated activity, the commission has to make a determination, at least as to subsections 2 and 4, which would be the ones I think are potentially applicable, that the activities proposed would likely impact or affect wetlands or water courses. And so we just think that based on everything that we've submitted and prodded by the questions from the commission and staff, that we don't think that that the record supports a finding of likely impact. You know, if the commission is amenable to making a finding of no regulated impact, you know, we would certainly be open to, you know, the individual permits for lots 7 and 8 to go along with the commission's past practices there. And so I would just emphasize those, you know, the regulation language and when you're considering whether it's a regulated activity. Thank you.
Can I, Commissioner Finaro, I just had a question about the quality of stormwater discharge and whether there's concern about future use of lawns and pesticides or fertilizer draining into the wetlands. I don't know if that's something that's been considered or to consider.
So at least in terms of stormwater, any you know, surface runoff that hits impervious, so including roof leaders and roadways, those get channeled into our detention basins. In terms of lawns, those watersheds are going to be going in the same direction as they currently go. However, again, all of those lawns are outside of the upland review area.
Commissioner Basserman, Commissioner Granolch, I would be in favor of approving this without regulated activity, but requiring them to come back for permits on lots 7 and 8, I believe it is, since they could possibly, something they might do there on those lots once they develop them, could possibly have an impact. So it's not giving them a blank check on those two. The rest of it is wouldn't normally need any kind of permitting from our part because there's no activity. We're not near the wetlands or in any setback areas. So that's my thought.
Is that, is there any other of the conditions other than 7 and 8 coming back for this, Commissioner Bassman, other than 7 and 8 coming back, that you would want to include in your thinking, Richard? One of which that was identified by the applicant and by staff is the inspections and the frequency of those inspections.
No, I wouldn't be too concerned about that part of it. I do think that there should be a provision in there that if they make any changes to the plans, that would be, you know, they would have to come back for our approval. You know, any change that really would affect us.
I guess when I look at the possible considerations, I guess number one, the pre-construction meeting and the initial erosion control inspection, even with unregulated activity, seems to me a good protection measure, if you will, to incorporate into our permit. Do you have any issue? Do you have any issue with number one?
No, I would not have any issue with that. That would be fine.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, I've pulled up the staff report with the conditions so that we can kind of run through them all. Certainly, I think if the commission is looking to do this as subdivision without regulated activity, I think there's some conditions that would not apply. I would agree that I think it's still useful to have the pre-construction and erosion control and final inspection meetings. Helps make sure everyone stays on the same page and helps avoid any hiccups that could become violations. Inland wetland watercourse permit application shall be submitted for lots 7 and 8. We've already talked about. It does say site plan approval by the commission or the inland wetland duly authorized agent must be obtained prior to application for building permit. So it's not necessarily specifying it needs to come back to the commission. If it's within the same footprint in the subdivision application, staying outside the 100-foot upland review area, then that seems like it would be appropriate for an agent approval. If they're looking to modify it a little bit, then that would be certainly something where I would think it should come back to the commission, at least for a preliminary review to see if they have any additional concerns. I still think that condition number 3 is relevant because this is relevant to information the commission has looked for in the past, and also information that I think some other agencies and departments will be looking for. Footing drain for lot 1, pretty straightforward. They're going to be putting one in. It's required for building code. Energy dissipator detail for footing drains, pretty straightforward. Town engineer has requested that all roof leaders be reduced to 1 pipe prior to entering the drainage system within the right of way. And then D is just asking for some clarification, which has already been addressed in a comment letter from Giuliano Associates dated December 8th, just making sure that that information ends up in the final site plans regarding the limits of clearing for phase 1. Condition number 4 is kind of just basically saying that the general grading has to comply with what was proposed in order for it to be considered, you know, in compliance with this approval. I think you could go either way with that one. I don't think it hurts to leave it in there.
So you would, Jamie, you would suggest that we add 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5? I mean, 4 doesn't seem to be any problem, but.
Yeah, 5, again, it doesn't hurt for us to have it, and that way we know what planning and zoning has approved.
That's only something that the P&Z is going to do.
Yeah, just so that we know that their information doesn't contradict our information.
Yeah.
I don't think 6 is appropriate if the commission is doing this as subdivision without regulated activity. Same with 7. 8, 9, and 10, I think the commission could decide either way.
Take 8, 9, 10 out, did you say?
I
No.
said 8, 9, and 10, I think the commission could decide either way, whether they think that those are appropriate. 8 is having the engineer on site during construction of the stormwater basins to ensure proper construction. Certification shall be submitted upon completion, documenting compliance with permit. I know the commission was concerned regarding the fact that the basins are being built on a slope. And that slope is uphill of the wetland areas. I do think it's relevant, and it's basically just asking for documentation confirming that what they proposed is happening is what happened. 9 could also satisfy the same thing. It's basically requesting the as-built survey upon completion of the project. And then 10 is certification that final cleaning of stormwater system occurs. And that stormwater maintenance reports for the privately owned stormwater improvements shall be submitted for the first 5 years after initial cleaning.
What did you say about number 7? I kind of missed hearing that.
7, I don't think would be appropriate if the commission is approving this as subdivision without regulated activity. If the commission determines that it is subdivision with regulated activity, then you could assess whether or not it's required at that point.
Okay, so basically, you'd like to have all the conditions except 6 and 7 in? I mean.
7 and 8.
Pardon?
No, 6 and 7.
No, 6 and 7. 6 and 7. Yeah, correct.
I could go either way
7 are
on
out.
8.
This is
Go back to
Commissioner.
1, Jamie, if you would. So maybe it's in a different area, but there was comment made about a weekly inspection. I didn't see that in 1. Where
Right,
is that?
that's 7.
Okay,
So that I would not recommend if the commission is doing this as subdivision without
Right.
regulated activity. That
Right.
might be a requirement of state approval. I'm not sure, because I think that this exceeds. I don't know if they need state approval, but I mean, that wouldn't be for inland wetlands. But I think that if you decide that this doesn't meet the threshold of subdivision with regulated activity, that it wouldn't be appropriate to require that weekly inspection report.
This is Commissioner Papantonis. Every time I hear an argument why it should be approved without regulated activity, I hear an argument why it should be approved with regulated activity. So and I'm really uncomfortable with, it's such a close call, and it's upland of the wetlands, because anything that goes wrong is going to go directly to the wetlands, even though it's just maybe beyond 100 feet. We're pretty high up here above wetlands.
James Denau, I mean, one rebuttal that I have for that in terms of like commission thought process on that specifically is if the Wetlands Commission is deeming pretty much anything above a wetlands as a regulated area, there's no real incentive to stay away from any wetlands. Because if you're going to deem it a regulated area, then, you know, at 200 feet, then we might as well be within 20 feet at that. You know what I mean? It's just kind of a weird thing. I just want you to think about that as well from an applicant point of view.
Commissioner Basserman, Jamie, what is the impact if 6 and 7 are removed? Any other impacts in declaring an unregulated activity for the applicant? Is it the only other thing is the fee?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. So the big difference would be the fee assessment. And then if the commission reviews it as a subdivision without regulated activity, again, they're determining that it's a subdivision without regulated activity, given the scope of how they're proposing to develop the site. So if they're not in compliance with the permit conditions, it's still a permit. So they still have to comply with the site plans that are proposed, the erosion controls, everything like that. If there's a violation issue that were to come up, say they don't have their erosion controls in, or something catastrophic happens with the anti-tracking pad entrance, it could be a violation. So it's certainly within their interest to still comply with the terms of the permit. So I would say the biggest difference would be the fee, and then also pushing down the final look at lots 7 and 8 until those two lots are proposed to be developed.
Yep. And what would the fee difference be?
So the fee that they have submitted and that has been processed at this time is, I believe, $9,060.
Yep.
And the amount that it would be if the commission determines that it's subdivision without regulated activity would be $110. So the applicant would be refunded the difference. There would be an application fee associated with the developments of lot 7 and 8. It would certainly be less than, the almost $9,000 difference.
Yep.
But it would, I think, given the fact that the majority of the activity is outside the upland review area, it makes sense.
Yep.
Commissioner,
And Commissioner Bassford, just to clarify once again, if we look at our record in practice over the last couple, 3 years, we reduced the fees when a subdivision has been determined to be a non-regulated activity?
Jamie Frederick, Inland Wetland Agent. It's a different fee in the fee schedule, which is why it's $110.
But I'm saying when we looked at the record over the last couple of years for similar applications and sites where there has been a determination that unregulated activity applied, was there a fee reduction in all those cases?
It's not a fee reduction. It's a fee assessment.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so in recent years, subdivisions have been approved as subdivision without regulated activity. So in that sense, I think there's precedence for the commission to approve this as a subdivision without regulated activity application. And the fee assessment for that type of application is $110, whereas the fee for subdivision with regulated activity is based on the area of site disturbance, regardless of its proximity to a well.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if this helps clarify it a little bit for you too, because we have 2 items. If the commission deems it a non-regulated activity, we would not be pursuing a fee reduction. It's a fee reduction if it's the
regulated activity.
The regulated activity because of the $9,000 fee. Yeah.
Third time is a charm. I got it now. Thanks.
This is Commissioner Papantonis. I think the applicant said something about $1,800 or $1,600 would be the fee if it's regulated.
Oh, yeah, okay. Commissioner Gradalch, you would teed up the discussion here with the conditions. Do you want to make a motion for this application?
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve the application for subdivision IW 21.08.01 175 Cherry Hill Road, 11 lot subdivision to be approved as without regulated activity. And that we would include, and I don't know if I don't have to read them all out, I won't, but we would include items 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, and 10 of the conditions that were suggested by the staff. And also the two, on the next page, the standard conditions and the general provisions that we put in all permits.
Hang on, I gotta re-look at item 1.
Could we get a second
Okay.
for, please?
The question again?
We just need a second for the motion before discussion, please. Thanks.
Okay,
This is Commissioner Begeman. Can I second it with an addition, or do we just second it and then have discussion?
you need to second and then we'll have discussion.
Okay, Clarice Begeman, Commissioner, second the motion.
Open it up for discussion.
Commissioner Begeman, I think what we need to add is that they will come back for permits for the 2 lots that,
Yeah, that's what I was looking at,
Already in
Mr.
there.
Beckerman, but that's item 2, I think.
That is,
Jamie
that is
Frederick and
item
Wetland
2
Agent.
already in there.
Yep, that's correct. It's
Okay.
item number 2.
okay, thank you.
Is there any further discussion on the motion? All right, we're going to take a vote. Commissioner Begeman,
Commissioner Begeman, aye.
Commissioner Papatonis,
I'm still deciding.
I looked at that face and I said,
I think I'm gonna abstain.
okay. Commissioner Finaro,
Commissioner Finaro agrees.
Commissioner Granolf,
Commissioner Ganalt, aye.
Commissioner Basserman, aye. Good luck, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time and consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, inland wetland 21-1003, 49 and 81 to 111 Commercial Parkway, construction of a last mile e-commerce delivery station. I know we have members of the applicant here this evening. Jamie, we had some activity from the last meeting that needed to take place. Can you just frame where we're at on this with the material that you've received and its review?
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent. I think at the last meeting, there was a concern just regarding treatment of some of the roof area and some of the van egress drive area. So the applicant made some modifications, which have been submitted and reviewed. And a staff report has been prepared in response to those revised comments and discussion the commission had at the last meeting. I'm sure somebody is here from the applicant team. If the commission wants a brief overview of those changes and or a general overview of the application again. I believe that there are no outstanding administrative tasks relative to this application. So it's just a matter of final review and then the commission considering their decision.
Okay. The applicant want to just frame the update and any other comments that they wish to make at this point in time?
Sure, Mr. Chairman. For the record, John Nuff, 147 Broad Street, Milford, Connecticut, on behalf of the applicant. Jamie did a great job summarizing the changes. Essentially, what the commission asked for last time was that we treat the remainder of the roof stormwater, which we've done. You've asked that we also treat a short portion of the access drive that is devoted to the vans leaving the site. We've done that. I shouldn't say we. Jeff Dewey, who was on the call with us, was able to accomplish both those things. So literally every bit of stormwater hitting the site will be treated. We have reviewed Jamie's staff report. We have reviewed the conditions of approval, and we are satisfied and will accommodate all those recommended conditions of approval. Jeff is here if you want any more detail. I think it's really straightforward. He added more isolator rows for the roof, added a hydrodynamic separator for that short portion of the access drive, and so it's everything that you've asked for. I guess appropriately so, given the holiday season.
Thank you. Jamie, you've been able to, this is Commissioner Bassman. Jamie, you've been able to review the hydrology and I noted the reduction in and across the board, I guess, with the new calculations. They all seem reasonable to you? You're muted.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. I mean, I reviewed the summaries and the increase in the new numbers. Generally, I didn't dive into the deep end of the calculations, but yeah, it made sense to me.
And by the way, keep in mind, we still have planning and zoning to go. So I'm very confident that the numbers are what Jeff has described them to be or represented them to be, but the town engineer, of course, gets another bite at this apple.
Right. But correct me if I'm wrong, we did get town engineer comments on the revised information, and he was comfortable
Town
with it, as I
engineer
remember.
is satisfied with the revised information.
Yep.
No additional comments.
Any other questions from the commission for the applicant? Should we pull up the conditions of approval, Jamie, at this point?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. I'll just kind of run through the conditions for the commission. Stop me if you have any questions. The first one's pretty standard.
Can you make that bigger? Sorry.
Oh. So the first one is the pre-construction meeting prior to land clearing, erosion control inspection prior to land disturbance, with everything to be marked out in the field by the surveyor prior to activity to make sure everything's in the right place. And then final inspection upon completion of the project. Condition number 2, I'm not sure if the commission wants to require a bond or not, but I've provided kind of 2 options. One is our standard bond language requiring installation or a bond to cover proper installation and maintenance of site erosion controls. Project engineers to submit to IW agent an itemized estimate of the cost, and the bond would remain in place until the site is stabilized and as-built has been submitted. Bond amount shall include all sediment and erosion control measures per sheets EC-1 and EC-2. Alternatively, given the size of the project and the relatively limited amount of wetlands, I did provide an alternative, which is the same language, just instead of all erosion controls per EC1 and EC2, the bond amount shall include all sediment and erosion control measures shown on EC1 and EC2 that are within 100 feet of a wetland or water course, and all sediment and erosion control measures shown associated with the stormwater management basin, and all inlet protection shown on EC1 and EC2, and all anti-tracking pads. And just a note that the bond shall apply to all project erosion control measures as they pertain to protecting wetland/watercourse areas.
Just Commissioner Bassman, Joe, the difference between the two, yeah, I understand it's a subset of EC1, EC2. How much of a subset?
I don't know what the difference is. I don't have those numbers, but I just thought it was a reasonable way for the commission to reduce the bond amount in a way that is relative to wetlands and watercourses, rather than saying some other arbitrary amount.
But,
Um,
I mean, is it cut in half?
I think it would probably be more than half, just
But-
looking at it, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah, oh, great, okay,
I don't
thank
know
you.
if the project engineer maybe has feedback on that.
Might as well continue.
All right. 3, again, I'm not sure that it's required, but it's easier to have it there. Upon clearing of site and until site is stabilized, applicant shall retain a qualified erosion control professional to inspect the soil erosion and sediment controls and provide written reports weekly and after each measurable rain event of 1/4 inch or greater. Site contractor shall work with engineering firm of record to ensure that temporary sediment traps are appropriately placed and sized for active and forthcoming site disturbance. Land surveyor shall identify in the field layout of site components, including but not limited to clearing limits, erosion control, stormwater system components, buildings, access drives, parking areas, etc. And that an as-built survey shall be submitted upon completion of the project to document compliance with the permit conditions. Certification that final cleaning of stormwater system occurred after completion of construction. As stormwater maintenance is a component of the provided stormwater treatment, copies of stormwater maintenance records shall be made available to the agency upon request, as stated in the operation and maintenance manual, to document compliance with the permit. And then the last one is just for state statutes identifying that the inland wetland permit shall not take effect until approval under planning and zoning chapters 124, 124B, 126, and 126A take effect. And then the standard conditions and general provisions of all permits.
And just for clarification purposes, I believe Mr. Knapp said that he had looked at these conditions and the applicant was accepting of them. Is that clear? Is that true?
That's true.
Anybody want to make a motion for this application? All right, I'll make a motion that inland wetland 21-1003 be approved. 49 and 81 to 111 Commercial Parkway, construction of a last mile e-commerce delivery station. The conditions identified on the staff report dated. Is there a date on this? 12/6/2021 regarding 49 and 81 to 111 Commercial Parkway be applied. All the conditions identified 1 through 8, including standard conditions and general provisions. And regarding item 2, under the specific conditions that I guess 2, we'll call it 2B, which is the bond related to item 2 be identified as the second paragraph under item 2 of that staff report.
Commissioner Grunwald, I'll second.
Any further discussion? Take a roll call vote. Commissioner Papatonis,
I approve it.
Commissioner Panaro,
I approve it.
Commissioner Commissioner Grinalsh,
Commissioner Grunwald, aye.
Commissioner Begeman,
Commissioner Begeman, aye.
Commissioner Basserman, aye.
Thanks, everyone. Happy holidays.
Yes, and thank you for your perseverance on this project and your accommodations.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. Take care.
Take care, guys. Up next, we have inland wetland 21-1005, 367, 373, 375, 377, and 383 East Main Street. The addition of another building and associated drainage and improvements to a previously approved in the 2004-01 mixed-use development. Jamie, where are we at on this?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, this application is actionable tonight if the commission is satisfied with the information provided. There were some minor modifications made since the last meeting, some additional comments provided regarding the stormwater. Application fee has been received. There's no outstanding materials that are required. I do have a staff report with some conditions for consideration, which kind of relate back to the phase or the initial permit, if you will, for the overall project. The applicant is present if the commission wants an overview of some of those modifications that were made. I think there was just a very brief presentation at the last meeting. But the new activity for the most part is outside the 100-foot upland review area. However, a majority of the stormwater is in the upland review area and ultimately discharges to the wetland area, which is why it requires a permit.
Okay. We have the applicant.
Yes, David Sacco, TPA Design Group, here representing the applicant. Essentially, the changes that we made were some minor adjusting of stormwater structures. The town engineer had requested some additional information on how the expanded retention system worked in terms of how everything would be plumbed together, and clarification because there was some errors and inconsistency in the drawings regarding the inverts of the outlet structures. So we provided additional information in response to his questions, and also some clarifications on some planting materials and the detailing for the rain garden in front of the additional building, building F. I received no further.
Excuse me, Jamie, can you or Dave, can you put a sketch up on the screen on so we can follow along with the changes?
The town engineer had asked for some additional detail, particularly on how the two additional retention beds would tie into the outlet pipe. So we provided some additional information on the plan and also on a detail sheet. Essentially, there'll be a chamber that will function, tie together the systems, include the control weirs, and allow this and provide for clean out or monitoring at that point, so that the structures will all function uniformly. The weir will control the three chamber sets to a uniform elevation until they overflow. In addition, there were some questions about the configuration of this rain garden. We provided an additional detail to clarify how that is configured. This is a detail of the outlet control structure that applies to that will be built under building C. So the first half of the chamber is essentially a manhole to connect everything together. The second half is accessible for monitoring. The weir is in the center to control how everything functions. And then this was, we've got rain gardens at the original portion of the development by buildings A and B. Those are equipped with an actual overflow structure as part of the storm drainage system. In the case of building F, there's not going to be an overflow structure. It's going to be less heavily planted, more with a lawn. It's intended to be more of a stormwater control function than a rain garden. So we provided additional information on how it will be landscaped and how it will differ from the other rain gardens in the initial phase of the project in response to comments from staff. I think those are really the only significant comments that we received. So in terms of the report, we have no
Just Commissioner
concerns.
Baskin, Mr. Sacco, can you explain the difference in your comment with the rain garden that functions as a rain garden as opposed to stormwater management system?
Well, the one at yeah, that was not very well considered. The storm systems that we're providing down at in the lower portion, because the site is predominantly flat, we're providing overflow structures so that they actively overflow through the downstream system because they're surrounded by buildings. We can't really let them just overflow naturally. The upper one is overflowing actively over a hillside. So it's more likely to be holding water for a period of time. And in the nature of the soils there, because it's shallow stone, we're trying to avoid having too much plant material that's just not going to be able to tolerate the wet conditions. And we're excluding the overflow structure because there's the possibility of natural overflow and additional difficulty in just piping out through the rock to get it into a downstream system.
Thank you. Those are the highlights?
Those are the highlights. I think the only thing I'd like to point out, just to confirm, because I know it's not explicitly mentioned in the agenda item, one of the things that we've sought permission for as part of this application is the DOT fence that had been requested, that the District 3 had requested that we provide a fence along the back of the site to separate it from the highway right of way. And I just want to remind the commission that that is part of this application, so that it's incorporated in the approval, so there's no questions down the road.
As Commissioner Basserman, Jamie, this is actionable this evening.
Amy Frederick, Inland Wetland Agent, that is correct.
Is there a staff report on this?
There is. As soon as I find my mouse, I can pull it. So here's the staff report, and it does specifically reference the fence added for DOT requirement. It is acknowledged that's part of the application at hand. I don't think I have any additional comments. The only thing is there were some questions that both myself and the town engineer had regarding putting the stormwater management underneath the building. And I don't have the technical expertise to handle that, but the town engineer seems satisfied with the response. Possible conditions for consideration. I've got the standard inspections that we usually look to have. All conditions and provisions of the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Permit IW number 200401 issued June 25th, 2020, not modified by this approval, shall remain in full force and effect. That being the other application that has been issued for the overall project. All erosion controls approved for inland wetland permit IW 200401 must remain in place for the duration of any activity authorized by this permit on parcels known as 367, 373, 375, and 377 East Main Street, unless otherwise approved by the inland wetlands duly authorized agent. I added that condition because I noticed that some of the erosion controls from that other application were not shown on the site plan relative to the stormwater drainage. However, it seemed pretty clear that the intent was that they would be there. They might have been on the site plan and just harder to see because of the way that it was, the layers were showing.
This Commissioner Basserman, Jamie, as a result of the modification, all of those erosion controls on the prior application are not changed in any way by the new addition?
So that Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, there are new erosion controls proposed for the additional phase for the new building. However, what I was getting at with that condition is making sure that erosion controls from the previous approval are in place while the drainage improvements on within the areas of disturbance from that original approval are being installed. I don't know that every single erosion control needs to be in place, which is why I said unless otherwise approved by the inland wetlands duly authorized agent. I'm sure there's some sections that don't need to be there.
Gotcha. I missed that. Thank you.
Prior to start of work, revised plans shall be submitted to the satisfaction of the inland wetlands duly authorized agent to clarify proposed grading relative to erosion controls and limits in clearing in the northeast corner of the site. I don't expect that to have any impact to wetlands or water courses. It's mostly just a way of documenting that any modification relative to that can be approved by the agent. I'm thinking specifically planning and zoning is probably going to want some clarification there as it would pertain to like landscaping setbacks relative to other residential areas, but kind of more of a clarification note than anything. Upon start of site work and until sites known as 367, 373, 375, and 377 East Main Street are stabilized. Upon completion of all proposed site work, the applicant shall retain a qualified erosion control professional to inspect the soil erosion and sedimentation controls. The report may be combined with the written report required per IW 200401 condition number 2. So ultimately, they're currently required to provide these reports. And this condition is saying that during the duration of activity on the parcels that were involved in the initial project, those reports shall continue. If they get to a point where they're only doing work on the new parcel being added, I don't think we need to require erosion control reports at that time because that activity is pretty far away from the wetland and water course, and the associated drainage within the upland review area would have been installed at that time. Next.
Commissioner Bassman, can I stop you there, Jimmy? I didn't see anything in here on a bond. Does the original bond?
I do not have any proposed language on a bond. The commission can still require a bond if they want to, but I didn't think it was necessary. I don't believe a bond was required for the initial project. So it seemed that it wouldn't necessarily, given that a majority of this activity is further away. However, if the commission does have a concern regarding the excavation for the stormwater, which is in the upland review area, certainly within, the commission's ability to provide a condition of approval regarding a bond.
Did we just not think of the bond on one, or we don't normally do that on a project like this? I mean, how did that not raise its head?
I don't think there was a bond for the first phase. I could be wrong. It certainly seems like an application where the commission would have considered it. I don't recall off the top of my head what discussion was had.
I don't recall any discussion. You're right. But for a project like this, I think we typically had a bond applied, no?
I think certainly in the earlier application, I would have thought it appropriate for the commission to consider a bond. I think it's slightly less applicable now. but certainly
Oh,
there's.
because of the project is underway and all that.
Mhm. And we haven't
Hmm.
had any issues on site. We have been getting the weekly erosion control reports and they have been very responsive to requests that we have. We get unsolicited photos of how well they're holding up the site. So hopefully we continue to have such positive feedback.
Yeah, I'm more just concerned about consistency and
Yeah.
treating all
yeah, I
applicants the
got that.
same and that kind of stuff.
Excuse me, can I jump in? This is David Sacco.
Sure.
I'm just looking at the IW approval letter from the original, and one of the conditions is there's plantings at there was a small area of wetland restoration where an old storm pipe was being removed. A bond shall be submitted to cover the completion of the above item, referring to the restoration work and maintenance of all project erosion and sediment controls for the site development. Permit holders to submit to the IWH an estimate of the bond, of the cost to bond these items for review and approval. So the original bid, the bond would have been handled by the developer or the contractor. So I don't know. I assume it had been posted, but it was included as a condition of the original approval.
That is correct, and it has been posted. I just did not remember going through that process. Probably because we were in an agreement on the bond amount and I didn't have to go back and forth.
Thank you, Mr. Sacco, for being our documentarian
Due
this
diligence.
evening.
All right.
Okay, and the rest of them were the same as we looked at previously.
And I think based on the fact that the erosion controls the commission would want to take a bond for have already been bonded for, it's not necessary
Right.
for
Yeah,
an
I buy
additional
that.
bond to be
I buy
provided.
The commission have any other comments on this application? Where we can take action this evening. We've got a staff report in front of us. Commission member want to make a motion regarding this application?
Commissioner Granholz, I'll make an application that we approve application IW 21.10.05 for 383 East Main Street, including any modification to our previous approval, which was IW 20.04.01, that might occur because of this approval. And that we should include as conditions all of the conditions set forth on the staff report 1 through 7, along with the standard conditions and other conditions on the next page. I don't have it in front of me, but you want to scroll that up? But just, yeah, in other words, the standard conditions plus the general provisions for all permits.
Is there a second?
Commissioner Begemon, second.
This is Commissioner Bassman. I offer just a friendly amendment to that motion that we identify the staff report as one dated 12/7/2021.
That's agreed.
Commissioner Begemon, agree.
Any further discussion on the motion from Commissioner Granholz? Take a roll call vote. Commissioner Begeman,
Commissioner Begemon, aye.
Commissioner Panaro,
Commissioner Finaro, aye.
Commissioner Panatonis,
Commissioner Papantonis, aye.
Commissioner Granholz,
Commissioner Granholz, aye.
Commissioner Basserman, aye. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Inland Wetland 211101, 3 to 7 Rockland Park. Restoration of a wetland area and pond, including removal of invasive species and the planting of native plants.
Commissioner Begemon, I'm just going to recuse myself until we finish this part.
Commissioner Funaro, should I as well?
Wait a minute.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, before you go, Clarice, feel free to kind of listen and join back in when we're done talking about it. I believe Clarice has chosen to recuse herself for personal reasons. So Commissioner Funaro, if you are involved in the project at all, then that would be grounds for recusing yourself. If you have no personal interest in the project, then you can sit on the item.
Commissioner Funaro, I recuse myself because I live right near there and I would support the project financially because I'm interested in it. So that's why.
And if it comes to a vote, we need you because we're down to 4.
We need to have 4, yes, seated members.
Commissioner Funaro, I will say on.
Unfortunately, I'm not sure if this item is going to be actionable tonight because I realized last minute today that there is a conservation restriction on the property in favor of the previous owner. And our regulations require that either that individual be noticed 60 days prior to an application being submitted to the agency, or a letter acknowledging that the application is in compliance with the conservation restriction be submitted for the record. So I reached out to the applicant about that today, and we can get an update from them on any sort of expected timetable for that and when they were hoping to start the project, and kind of go from there. But I certainly think we can go forward with doing the review of the application, confirming the commission has all the information, and kind of getting to a point of seeing if that's the only thing that would be outstanding. The other thing the commission has to consider is the fee reduction request. The applicant had been provided guidance to submit the $60 deep fee, as that is a non-waivable required fee. I have since calculated out the I recalculated out the application fee based on areas that were provided by the soil scientist for the project. And let me pull up the staff report real quick. Staff or the application fee would be $2,573. So what the applicant is requesting is that the fee be reduced from $2,573 to the required $60 deep fee. That is in line with past practice that the commission has implemented for projects of this type where they are looking to provide an environmental enhancement. So a motion should be made regarding that when the commission is ready to do that. And then just to kind of have in the back of the commission's head as you get your overview of the project, I also want the commission to kind of state on the record regarding non-permitted uses or non-permitted and as of right uses. So conservation activities can be considered non-regulated activities. There are limitations to that. It's up to the commission to decide. In the past, the commission has a past practice of determining projects of this scope to be regulated activity, but because they have acknowledged that they are an environmental benefit, they have granted the fee reduction. But I just want the commission to confirm that on the record, especially since this year the commission did make a determination that a project that involved simply just some cutting of invasive species was as of right. So I just want the commission to confirm that this application is or isn't different. This application does involve ground disturbance, which was one of the things the commission had mentioned at the time as being a distinctive difference between the two. But I just thought it was important for the commission to touch on that as well. So with that, I will hand it over to the applicant to give a brief overview of the application.
Thank you, Jamie.
This is Ingho from 173 Clark Avenue, and I'm the applicant for the 3 to 7 Rockland Park restoration. Since the last meeting, there were some on the commission that we delineate the wetlands, which is what our soil scientist, Matt Davison, has already done. And this is where we were able to do that calculation of what the fee is. And he's also on the phone tonight. He can speak a little bit more about that. The other thing that he will probably be also speaking about is the plantings, which was something that the commission had also asked that we put some energy and thought into what were the right type of plants for the wetland plants, as well as the spacing around the plants. And then the third item was also a revised proposal from All Habitats around the plan for the next 3 years around dormant mowing and for the application of herbicide, very, very selective for phragmites. And so I have also asked that the All Habitats representative join tonight's meeting. After both Matt and the All Habitats representative speak, I would like to speak a little bit about the requirement that Jamie and I kind of discovered today, and talk about that for a few minutes. But I'll first turn it over to Matt, who has done an extensive amount of volunteer work to help us with the delineation. And I want to thank him publicly and personally for doing so. And I'll turn it over to him to talk a little bit about the delineation as well as the plantings.
Thanks, Ing. Matt Davison. Trying to turn my camera on, but it's not letting me, but I don't know that you need to see my face. So after the last meeting, I had a couple of action items that I had to do. So I'll try to go through those and hopefully I hit each of the ones that I was tasked with. I went back out to the site and I reflagged the wetlands. Specifically, there was one side of the wetland that hadn't been flagged before. The reason it hadn't is there's a big rock outcropping there. It would be on the left-hand side of what you see there. I was able to flag it. I brought my daughter out with me and we used waders and we waded through the wetland to do it from the interior, but we flagged the entire wetland and we also GPS'd it. The shape of the wetland there is sort of from the GPS data we had. We basically imported it into a GIS program, and that gave us the calculation for the wetland area to help Jamie with the fee calculation. And again, the reflagging was done with 2 different colors to make it stand out so that when the work is done in the future, the wetland location is abundantly clear. I went through the plan that was done. Frankly, the plan that was done by, I think Shirley played a large part in it, and I'm sure Ying helped out too, but it was very good. There wasn't much I sort of commented on. The planting zones were reasonable, and I thought the plantings that they had proposed in each of those areas were reasonable. I recommended focusing on 2 areas in the plantings. It would be zones. It's in the application package there, Jamie. But there were 2 zones. Yeah, zone 2 is on the far right-hand side. That's where the wetland outlets. And then zone 5, which is on the far left, the southern end of the wetland. There's some groundwater breakout there, and that's where there's some discharge where the water sort of enters into the wetland. And I think in terms of acknowledging I think this wetland is locally significant in terms of its functions and values, particularly water quality functions. I did confirm that this wetland does drain into the sound via pipe underneath Rockland Place. There's an outlet between 2 buildings across the street. There's some frag over there, and then it drains from there down into the sound. So, certainly like I said, the water quality functions should be acknowledged. And I think in this particular case, what they're proposing, there's an opportunity here to enhance those functions. So with zone 5 on the far left-hand side, the plan calls for sort of generically planting rushes and sedges, and I completely agree with that. What I would recommend is plantings of the plugs from New England wetland plants, a large variety I would use, and I would plant that area densely. I think that the dense plantings, plug plantings there will help to attenuate pollutants that are entering the wetland in that area. And then Similarly, in zone 2, which is the blue area on the far right, that's where the wetland exits the underneath Rockland Place. That area right now is basically just a Phragmites monoculture. So that area can also be planted. Right now they have the plantings that were proposed there were, obligate plants, essentially plants that can survive in ponded areas. So again, the plantings that were proposed match the hydrology there. I recommended increasing the plant species diversity a bit. It just makes the community a little more resilient. If some don't like it and some do, they can sort of adjust on their own. I commented a bit on the all habitat plan. I did originally, I think the plan was just strictly mechanical treatments. And I do think that some chemical treatments here are warranted. I know specifically for frag, I think they're proposing to use imazapyr, and I know that's been successful for frag treatment in the past. The other thing that I think is a good combination for removal of invasives is a combination of mechanical and chemical, and certainly all habitat can weigh in here. But in this particular case, I think, doing some type of mechanical treatment followed by spraying of resprouts can be successful with very limited use of herbicides, because if you time it right, you're really just spraying resprouts, and if you catch them early, you can be very targeted with the applications. And the benefit there is that you're killing the roots essentially and giving the natives an opportunity to thrive. I commented a bit. I think Shirley had wanted to use solar tarping initially, and I cautioned the use of solar tarping, although I think that if you collect a little more data there, you could use solar tarping effectively. I just suggested that area be inspected in the spring to make sure that it's not actually a vernal pool. If it was a vernal pool and in bistamids, the mole salamanders like spotted salamanders were using it, they live beneath the ground in the upland areas surrounding that ponded area. So if you tarped it, you could conceivably kill them. But you can simply do a vernal pool inspection in the spring. And if it's not a vernal pool, then I think you could safely solar tarp, and that could be another tool to get rid of the invasive species. I think that's about it. I think, the other thing I did was there was a comment before about sort of plant quantities. And I think that in this particular case, there's probably a need for some flexibility. It's difficult to calculate exact areas and things. So what I did is I provided Ying and Shirley with a plant spacing chart that I use on my own projects. And basically what it does is it gives you, you take your plant spacing and then you take the area that you're planting, and then it gives you a number to divide it by. And that essentially gives you the full planting area. So it's a useful tool. And I think in this particular case, probably the way to plant this area would be just to identify sort of how they've done it. But even within those planting zones, sort of smaller planting zones where you are carving out a specific area, and then within that area, using this chart to plant it fully. Yeah, but again, I think the plan, like I said, was in good shape when I picked it up, and I didn't have much to comment on. I think, it's a good project overall. I think that this is, an area that, it's visible to a lot of people. It's, like I said, the wetland provides water quality functions and things that are valuable to the local community. And I think that this plan would enhance the wetland functions and, frankly, some of the wetland values, societal values, that people can go by and look at it, and it will have some aesthetic value and potentially even some educational value. And I think it's a good project overall. And as I stated in the last meeting, I would offer to assist the ladies as they move forward with this. Again, I live locally, so it's not that big of a lift for me to, for example, do things like come by and do like a vernal pool inspection to see if it is actually a vernal pool and assist them with the plantings. They're going to use New England wetland plants. New England wetland plants is a great resource. They're happy to provide you with as much information as you need to assist you with your project. So.
Mr. Davis, this is Commissioner Basserman. You certainly are to be commended for the work that you've done and the work that I guess you're planning to continue to do. Community is certainly owe you a debt of gratitude. I guess I have one question on the plantings and your experience with the survivability, I guess, of what should the expectation be in terms of the plugs that are put in? How many actually, take root and thrive?
The plugs do pretty well. That's why I like to use them. They're also very easy to plant. They tend to, I usually recommend them on 2 foot at 2 foot spacing, but oftentimes when you go back, you find that, things like soft rush and tussock sedge, a year into growth, they've filled that area out completely, and you usually get a pretty dense planting bed. The emergent stuff tends to do better. I think where you can get some mortality in shrubs and things, especially if they start to get crowded out by emergence. A lot of times what happens with shrub plantings is that you'll plant something that's 3 or 4 feet, and a year or two later, the emergents have essentially overtopped it. But I think
you have high expectations then that the plugs will really thrive and spread.
Yeah, and I think the biggest challenge here, frankly, is going to be in the initial, you say 3 or 4 years, it's going to be establishing the natives while eradicating the invasives.
Yeah.
That I think that's why I think starting with the mechanical treatment up front and sort of clearing the palette, and then using targeted herbicide treatments afterwards to really, target the stuff as it's resprouting, is probably the best chance of success. It's one of those things where you're not going to be able to leave this for long, and I'll follow up with the ladies after, but you can't leave it for long. If you neglect it for a year, you're going to be starting back over again. And I think it's the invasives. There's not a ton of it. I mean, there's a lot of invasive coverage, but there's not a ton of different species. I think once they learn what the invasives look like when they resprout, I mean, anyone with a small sprayer, even just a 2-gallon sprayer, with a knowledge of what they're doing, can, maintain that area. You'll obviously want to use herbicides that are intended for use in that type of area. Something like, and again, I would lean on all habitat, but, something like a rodeo, which is Roundup, which is approved for use in and around aquatic environments. It doesn't have a surfactant in it, which can be toxic to aquatic wildlife. But using the properly labeled herbicides, very targeted foliar applications, and regular, I think will give you the best chance of success. And I think once you control the invasives, the natives will take off, and then essentially start to outcompete the invasives. I've done something similar on my property, so I sort of know what the battle's like. But it can be won. It's a small area. And I think that's the biggest thing. If this was a huge site, I would probably think that this might be a waste of time. But this area is so small, I do think this is a very manageable project.
Good to know.
Great, thank you. I don't know who from All Habitats is here. I think I saw Karen's name, but I'm not sure. If the representative from All Habitats wouldn't mind speaking a little bit to our revised proposal, which I believe Jamie has. Okay. Well, they may not be on here. I'm happy to talk a little bit about this. Basically, we went back and revised the proposal, and the proposal basically showcases, if you can scroll down a little bit, you'll see that there's a schedule that now shows both mechanical removal as well as a very selective application of herbicide that's targeted directly at the phragmites. One of the important things about this particular proposal is that it showcases that we are really looking to do most of the mowing in the dormant season. And that's a large part of kind of where I'll address a little bit about the other issue around notification and why this dormant season is so important. But in the meantime, the whole thought process, and I know that when I had discussions with All Habitats as they were building this, it was really around the idea that we do a really strong sort of a mechanical removal or mulch mow this winter, And then in the spring, we start to move forward and start to do a little herbicide then, and again, a little bit again in the summer, and then do another mulch mow. And we do this over basically 2 to 3 years. What's interesting about what will happen is that in the very first year, you will see a much bigger difference because we will have almost taken things down to a level that basically the phragmites, when they return, they don't really get up higher than a few feet the next time around. And then we can keep on just kind of working our way down. And I think that this is basically the thinking behind this. I know that Matt and I had also had discussions about this too, and about how this was a more effective way to go. I'll just pause for a second in case all habitats returned to the meeting.
Mr. Bassman, I have a question. Is that a specialty mower?
I believe it is. I can't speak fully, but I believe it is.
They-
Frederick and
Yeah, they may just use hand equipment there because it's kind of close to the edge, but they do have specialty mowers. I think they call like Marsh Masters. I mean, all Habitat does, frag removal on massive scales,
Okay.
huge frag swamps. But I think in this case, they probably use something. They might just do it by hand, frankly.
Okay. Maybe you could touch base on the issue.
Yes.
Yeah, and I know
Okay.
the owner, Dave Roach, too. So I mean, I can work with them too. I can talk with them too and sort of move this thing along with them.
Thank
Great.
you, Matt.
Great.
So yes, let me talk about the issue. So when we transferred this property over from the previous owner, it was under the understanding on both sides that the goal would be to actually actively do this conservation. And so the conservation easement was put into the documentation when the deed transferred. It took a little while for us to get through all of the paperwork to be able to close on it. But the previous owner, Yale University, knew that we were trying to make it to the dormant mow season. And that's why, for that reason, everyone was kind of in line. I think what we didn't realize was there was this 60-day official notice that had to be given. And so what happened was on October 14th, the day before we closed on October 15th. On October 14th, I came in front of the Inland Wetland Commission to ask for guidance for how to actually put an application together. And then October 15th, we closed. And on the closing day, we had an email correspondence about the fact that we were going straight for the permit. But we didn't do an official notification in terms of like certified mail. We didn't do anything of that. It was a very casual email understanding that we were going to apply for a permit. And so on November 9th, we submitted a permit application. It was discussed in the first meeting on the 11th, and then here's our second meeting on the 9th. And now catching this a little late was unfortunate, but on the other hand, there would have been no way we could have done the 60 days without actually having added. If we had informed them on the day of the closing, which would have been October 15th, then we would have been actually into the December timeframe. We would have missed the mowing season. So I realized that it's an important documentation that we go forward and make sure that this is aligned. But I'd really like to find a way if we can still be able to go forward with a dormant mow or not too far into the winter season. I think we still have time, but I just wanted to put that out there, and that we have this afternoon, as soon as we figured this out, I notified Yale and I asked them very quickly if they could try and turn around a letter acknowledging that they had receipt from us about knowing about the permit, and then also making sure that it sort of fits within the requirements of the conservation easement, which I don't believe it wouldn't fit within the conservation easement requirements. So that's sort of the explanation.
Do you have a fish or cut bait kind of date in your head where it would be too late to do anything?
My conversations with David at All Habitats was that we still had time, as long as we could get in by about January as sort of the latest we could go in. And that's part of the reason is because the red-winged blackbirds come in early March. We have to kind of catch right before they show up. So, basically, if we were going to be mowing, we'd be mowing into the sort of the January, February timeframe. That's like drop that is the sort of the line. And so we had hoped we might be able to begin the beginning of January, which would have predicated on a permit being granted in December. And that's kind of why we're in this, yeah. I'm bringing it up now.
This is Commissioner Papantonis. Have you talked to Yale about waiving the 60 days?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, to clarify, that's our requirement, inland wetlands
Okay.
agency requirement. However, so the requirement is that they be noticed 60 days before the submission of an inland wetland application, or in lieu of such notice, that a letter essentially documenting that the conservation restriction holder is aware of the application and is satisfied that it does not contradict the restrictions is submitted. So basically, we're waiting for that letter to be submitted at this time. That essentially that Yale is aware of the application and that they do not see it as conflicting with the conservation restriction they have on the property. I took a quick look at the filed quick claim deed on the land records today, and it outlines a lot of information regarding the conservation restriction. And I didn't see anything that looked like a conflict in that language. However, it is a requirement of the regulations. I think that if the commission were to approve the application without that in hand, it's a slippery slope where the commission is setting precedents for future applications. So I think the commission has to keep that in mind. I do.
Commissioner Bassman, Jamie, as an alternative, we could always have a special meeting, no?
Yes, so I do feel bad because I had heard the words conservation restriction before and it never clicked. And then I was finalizing my notes for today and I was like, wait, conservation restriction, that would mean that we need that notice. It was not checked on the application form, but it also, I mean, I'm not blaming the applicant. I'm just saying it's an instance where unfortunately it was realized at the last minute. I certainly think if that's the only outstanding item, that and possibly getting confirmation from all habitats that they're looking to either cut by hand or use some sort of low impact machine. Especially given the fact that the commission's meeting remotely, if we can find a day that everyone can get together and have a quick 10-minute meeting, we could address this.
I mean, I think it's, to me, it's a activity certainly worth noting. There is a date that we need to be conscious of that was presented this evening, and to the extent that we can help move this thing along by a special meeting of the commission once that letter is evident, to me would be supportive.
Shirley McCarthy, can I say something?
Please do.
Okay, there are very few bird, and Matt, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there are very few bird species that use Phragmites, but red-winged blackbirds are one species that do. It's really important to me to have those Phragmites cut back before they come and have babies. So if we can't do that this winter, it puts us off, 6 months to a year.
Right.
I don't want to hurt these birds. They'll go to some other Phragmites patch, and there are plenty of them in Short Beach, but the email that Ing has from Yale is not sufficient.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, I don't believe so, because there's the correspondence going out to Yale, but there's nothing coming back from Yale indicating confirmation of the application. Do you think you can get a response from Yale?
Yeah.
Within, like, what time frame? If you
I
had to
dropped,
guess.
I sent them the note this afternoon. It was they probably had already gone home. I will call them first thing in the morning. I don't think it would be difficult for them to at least respond to the email quickly. And then obviously I can try and push them to get a letter out. It's just a letter of acknowledgement. They've known about this. They were trying to help us as well by racing to get to that point. It's nothing new to them.
Hopefully, if that all transpires, we can meet next week at a Zoom meeting and get this thing and move it along.
Does the commission tentatively want to schedule something for next Thursday? Thursday, or do you want to wait and schedule something via email after we get confirmation of receiving something?
I like the former.
Okay.
If we can get a commitment for, Thursday, it gives people time to plan. The other way, it's a little too slippery.
Of
This
the
is Attorney
commissioners,
Papantonis. The only concern I have is that there's only 4 of us here, and if someone can't make the meeting, then that's going to be a problem because we won't have a quorum.
right,
Well,
so
we'll certainly get it out to all members of the commission, how many there were at the time, I guess.
of the commissioners that are present and seated for this item, does next Thursday work for a brief meeting?
I will make it
Yeah.
happen for me.
9th and what's that, the 16th?
What time? I don't think.
Regular time, 7 o'clock work for everyone, or would a different time work better?
I could do
I
like
think 7 o'clock because Suzanne with kids and things like that.
It sounded like 7 was not gonna work for
I
Fenaro.
can't make it. Sorry, my computer just, okay, I can't do. Next
We can't do
Thursday,
next Thursday, or we can't do.
I can maybe pop in for like, what, 10 minutes or something, just to say yay or nay or yay, nay. Is that, how long would the meeting be?
It probably wouldn't be a very long meeting, but would it help if we were to have it at a different time, like it, or would a different day be required?
I'm good earlier or later.
Did you say there's another commissioner that isn't here that could be here, so it wouldn't be dependent on me?
Theoretically, but we would be hoping that that would work out.
This is Commissioner Papantonis. If we did it Monday, the 20th, or is that?
I'm gonna suggest that. Does Monday the 20th work for people?
Yes.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
I can't do Thursday, the 18th.
Oh,
okay.
Not the 18th, the 16th, whatever it is, 15th.
So if we can get the outstanding information prior to Monday, the 20th, the commission wants to try and schedule a special meeting for Monday, the 20th at 7 PM
Yep.
to
it works.
consider this further.
I'll make it happen.
Great.
So aside from that paperwork, is there any information that the commission is looking to have? Do you want to take a preliminary look at the conditions of approval to see if that sparks any questions or further comments?
That might be a good idea, this Commissioner Papantonis. Just so that if we're calling a special meeting, that we can just call it, vote yay, and move on.
And the commission does have enough information that you can make a decision on the fee reduction request this evening as well. So just to take a quick look.
I'm curious on the conditions of approval. Item 6, you raised an issue regarding a bond.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, you can probably guess what my thoughts are, considering I just put bond with a question mark and didn't provide language. I just wanted the commission to consider whether or not a bond is required. I cannot think off the top
Our
of my
precedent
head
has not been to establish a bond on
of
something,
requiring a
right?
bond. Usually, the commission has, tried to leave funds available for troubleshooting, monitoring, replanting as needed. So I think allowing those funds to go towards particularly like condition number 4, each phase of planting shall be monitored by a soil scientist for 3 years from initial planting to ensure success with the criteria outlined in condition number 3 above. Report shall be submitted to the IW office, and any recommendations shall be implemented unless the IW agent / IW agency finds that the recommendations exceed the scope of this approval. And condition 3 is that the soil scientist shall oversee each planting phase of the project after invasive species removal. The soil scientist shall help assess planting density appropriate to establish a native non-invasive flora that will A, stabilize the disturbed area, B, help prevent the reestablishment of invasive species. And I know that the soil scientist has indicated he's willing to help with the project. I'm not trying to say that this is the level he should be willing to help for free, but these are kind of conditions that I thought might be important to help ensure that the project is successful and that the actions that need to be taken are being taken in a timely fashion so that work isn't being undone, if you will, and that the project doesn't reset back to square one. And then condition number 2 was based on Matt Davison's comment regarding vernal pool survey, and basically that should occur prior to any tarping. And then just preliminary inspections, planting inspections, and final inspections.
Commissioner Bassler, let me make a suggestion that unless any of the commissioners that are on the call this evening have an issue, certainly raise those issues now with those conditions of approval. I don't think we can approve preliminarily because the people that are going to be on the meeting on the 20th may be different than those that are attending this evening. But I would make a make a motion this evening that the fees associated with the application be limited to the $60 deep fee, and that we waive the fee based on total area disturbance.
This is Commissioner Papantonis. I'll make that motion.
Second, Commissioner Grinold.
Any further discussion? Let's see. Then I think we're good to go on the fee, and we hope to get that letter and resolve this issue on the 20th.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again for your application.
Thank you. Thank you to the mission.
Thank you. And thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Matt.
Inland Wetland 211102, 14240 Austin Ryer Lane, air replacement of a drainage outlet.
Jamie Frederick, in the wetland agent. We do have members of the applicant team present. I just want to start off with, there has been a request from the applicant that this item be continued to the January meeting so that the association can get a better understanding of what it is that they're proposing to do and why they're proposing to do it. This application was submitted in response to a notice of violation regarding a stormwater system that had failed and needed some repair work completed. I do think that it would be beneficial for the commission to look specifically at the fee assessment for this application and the mitigation requirements. The other thing that I just wanted to mention is that we have a wetland delineation. The flags are picked up on the survey. We do not have a wetlands report. It's my understanding that the individual that did the wetland flagging no longer works for the company that was hired to conduct the investigation. So unless essentially another wetland investigation was conducted, we would not receive a wetland report. So I just wanted to confirm if the commission is satisfied with the wetland delineation itself and is willing to waive the requirement for a wetland report in addition to that, or if that is something the commission thinks is required. So I'm going to pull up the site plan real quick.
Yeah, while you're doing that, is Commissioner Bassman, anything in the regulations that would require that report?
Jamie Frederick, in the wetland agent. I believe it is a standard requirement, but it is something the commission can waive.
Okay.
And just also on the subject of the fee assessment, the applicant has submitted a fee reduction request. So the application that was, or the fee that was submitted originally with the application was based on direct wetland impact and overall site disturbance. And that amount was $1,160. I took this application was received the day before our last meeting, so I had not looked at it before the meeting. I took a look at it, and there is also on the application, it indicates 2,000 square feet of watercourse impact, and that relates to an intermittent watercourse that is essentially the eroded channel from the outlet of the drainage structure. So that was not, that 2,000 square feet of watercourse impact was not included in the application fee. So I calculated out the application fee, including that 2,000 square feet of disturbance. And the fee for that disturbance would be an additional $3,050. So I think it's kind of a unique situation where this application is being submitted in response to a violation. It's kind of like a passive violation, if you will. It was a failure of a structure. The homeowners association did not design the drainage or the structure. They are trying to do the right thing and fix the problem. So I said that it'd probably be a good idea to submit a fee reduction request if that was something they were concerned about regarding being able to complete this project. I'm not aware of past precedents, but I certainly think it has its own merits that the commission can consider. And so I will share that fee reduction letter, I think. Actually, I'll start off with the site plans.
Yeah, it's like, yep.
So Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, this is the existing conditions. You can see where the stormwater structure has failed, resulting in this eroded channel. And this is the intermittent water course impact area that I think needs to kind of be resolved so that the applicant knows what's required. Because in addition to the application fee, the other thing to consider is that if there is more than 750 square feet of direct wetland impact, then section 7.9 of the regulations kicks in, which requires 2-to-1 mitigation. The mitigation can be reduced down to 1-to-1, but only on a case-by-case basis, and it cannot be reduced below 1-to-1. So
This is Commissioner Bassman, Jamie, so the water course issue is the thing that puts it over the 750?
correct. And we don't have documentation as to what the pre-existing condition
Right.
was prior to the structure failing or being installed. So, I mean, either way, even if the water course or a wetland is man-made, it's still a regulated area. But I think this is a unique situation where there obviously is a repair that needs to be made. And I think the commission should consider what the applicant has to say and the circumstance of the situation, and consider whether there's possibly any flexibility in the regulations to accommodate a positive result in the end. That's
okay.
so
Did the
let me-
applicant on the call?
I believe so.
Yes, this is Pete Parent, CHA, representing the applicant.
Good evening.
Good evening. So as Jamie mentioned, basically the issue with that intermittent water course is that it very likely is just the result of this previously installed drainage system failing and creating a channel that has now intersected the water table. So it meets the definition of an intermittent water course, and having, you know, evidence of scour and now evidence of water absence, a stormwater event, because it's now eroded a channel deeper than the typical water table on this slope. And in order to properly repair this, you know, we need to get to the toe of that slope so that the new outlet protection we put there is effective. So, and there's also the issue of the 10 to 15 foot deep scour hole that needs to be repaired just from a safety issue as well as a slope stability issue upstream. So there's really no way of getting around filling that section in while repairing this thing properly. So right now, it's an eroded hole and an eroded channel. Every time you get a heavy rainstorm, you're pushing sediment out into that wetland. So the impact here, I think, is more beneficial to the natural wetland than any value that this intermittent water course may have. It's really just a sharply cut channel through a woodland area. There's no vegetation to speak of in it. There's the debris of the pipe sections that have collapsed into the scour hole on the upper end. So our feeling is that the money that would be put towards wetland restoration and the fee for the additional disturbance is better spent repairing this situation that, as Jimmy mentioned, the folks that live here and are now going to be responsible for the financial end of this thing didn't have any say in how this thing was constructed, 30 to 40 years ago. So we hope that the commission would view that favorably. And as Jamie also mentioned, right now we're kind of tabling any discussion on the technical merits of the design as the homeowners association kind of wraps their arms around what's being required of them and why, and how they're going to end up eventually affording to construct this thing.
Commissioner Basserman, any idea how long it took for that depression to get to 10 to 15 feet?
I would say it was at least 10 years. And if you look back at some of the old LiDAR data, you can kind of see there was already a depression there in the contour. The 2016 data definitely shows something there. And the 2012 data also, you can kind of start to see it. So it's been working its way for quite some time. And there are issues on site just from the installation of the overall drainage system that we've been looking at with the homeowners association and the property manager. The construction of this facility was not top notch from the drainage and the pavement standpoint. There's a significant number of issues. So it's fair to suspect that the outlet protection that was installed here originally was probably substandard. And just from a general design standpoint, to have an outlet mid-slope like that is generally a bad idea. This is the type of thing that happens. You get a downstream channel that begins to erode and it just works its way back.
Jamie, do you have a recommendation on what you think is a good balance between the regulations and this maybe one-of-a-kind situation?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, there's certainly room for the fee reduction request. And I believe they're requesting that the fee be reduced to the $1,160, which has been submitted, which I personally do not take. I would not take any issue to that. I think that covers the costs of reviewing the application. And one of the reasons there's two reasons for granting a fee reduction. One is that the application fee is in excess of what reflects the review of an application. And the other one is that the project will have a benefit to the environment. And certainly they're trying to resolve the erosion issue on the site. So I think that there is rationale for both points for granting the fee reduction. Where I am not quite so sure, and particularly as this item is being continued, if the commission doesn't have any strong or clear feelings one way or the other, it might be worth getting guidance from town council, is regarding the 2-to-1 mitigation. Save that. So, or the 1-to-1, because it can be reduced to 1-to-1. So If the proposed activity involves filling or disturbance of a wetland or watercourse, then the following will be required. Filling or disturbance of wetland or watercourse greater than 750 square feet will require compensation. Since it's not possible to replace a mature functioning wetland or watercourse with a created habitat, wetland or watercourse creation will be at a ratio of at least 2:1 in area. The commission may reduce the ratio on a case-by-case basis, but cannot reduce the ratio to compensation to a ratio below 1:1 in area. Compensation measures should be considered in the following order of priority. 1, restore pre-existing wetland or watercourse. 2, enhance degraded wetland or watercourse to improve functions and values they provide. 3, create productive wetlands or watercourse resources. And then
Hey,
it goes
Jamie, let me
into,
ask a question at this point, Commissioner Basserman. You know, it says mature watercourse. It sounded to me like, as the project or the condition was explained, that, you know, this is something that's been changing over time as the erosion continues to occur. And
Yeah.
so am I hanging too much on the word mature?
well, Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, I think that that's a good thing to, I guess, hang your hat, if you will, regarding the 2:1 versus 1:1 and the reason
Right.
to reduce the compensation to the 1:1. The thing is, I don't see a mechanism for reducing it below 1:1. And I think that you could argue that potentially that, like, the outlet
What
is,
would 1:1 entail?
so 1:1 would be, they have, we'll say 2,050 square feet of impact, then they would have 2,050 square feet of mitigation.
But what would that, from a standpoint about a pocket, what would a 1:1 mitigation entail?
I think that depends on what the mitigation is. So,
Right.
like, could they consider the outlet of the structure enhancement because it's I mean, it's not really necessarily enhancement of the wetland, but it's enhancement of the features to the wetland in the sense that it's protecting the wetland area from further erosion. I don't know if that's too much of a stretch or not, but I guess I'm just trying to, like, throw out ideas.
Yeah,
The other thing,
I think this needs a little study. I
Yeah.
don't know that we have enough creativity at almost 10 o'clock this evening to come up with a good balanced solution here, or whether we need to take some time and look at the language in the regulations and try to figure out a way to ameliorate, if you will, things like 2:1 in mitigation and that kind of stuff.
This is Commissioner Papantonis. I think that your point, Commissioner Basserman, about whether this is a mature water course or not is something that I'm wondering if we should consult town council on this issue because the interpretation of the regulations and whether we're bound by the 1:1 or 2:1.
Well, I certainly don't have a problem in looking at town council if we are looking for ways to, you know, get a solution here. But it says the commission may reduce the ratio on a case-by-case basis, right? But cannot
Right.
reduce the compensation to below 1:1.
Right, but
Go ahead.
no, I just, to your point about whether this is a mature water course or not, it might not fall within the regulation if it's not.
I think it probably still would fall within the regulation because it says filling or disturbance of a wetland or water course greater than 750 square feet will require compensation, period.
All
And
right.
then it goes on, so the rest of the language is kind of assuming that it's a mature wetland or water course.
Right.
So I think if you're looking at a wetland or water course that is not mature, then that perhaps is a reason for the one-to-one, because you're not trying to replace those mature functions. So
How about this? Jamie, do you agree that we need to be a little creative here?
So it sounds like the commission is open to possibly reducing it to the one-to-one ratio and looking to see what other options might be available, including staff maybe reviewing past practice a little bit more to see if there's anything, and reaching out to town council to see if there's any wiggle room in the condition in the regulation language. Is that fair to say?
Yes, and yet I think, clearly, given the intent here, et cetera, I think a fee reduction to what the applicant has suggested, I think is appropriate.
All right, so I'm thinking maybe if the commission has enough information to vote on the fee reduction, that might be good to get done today. And then we can move forward with some more research on the mitigation requirement, and maybe the applicant can do some more consideration as to whether or not there's any possible lower cost things that they can do, and or maybe outlining some of the benefits specifically of the proposed activities, so that the commission can then consider whether or not any of that can be fall within this language. Does that seem appropriate?
That seems appropriate, so I guess I'll make a motion that regarding inland wetland 211102, 14240 Austin Ryer Lane, that the applicant's request for a fee reduction to the 1,025, was it? Whatever the number was. $1,160 be granted.
Second, Commissioner Granold.
Any further discussion? All right, we'll take a vote. Commissioner Grenache,
Aye.
Commissioner Finaro,
Aye.
Commissioner Begeman,
Commissioner Begeman, aye.
Commissioner Papantonis,
Commissioner Papantonis, aye.
Commissioner Basserman, aye. And then Jamie, I guess to the extent that it's a quick review, and we've got a recommendation, maybe we could consider it at the special meeting. If not, we'll deal with it in January.
All right, and just real quick, one last thing while we're on this subject. We do have the wetland delineation, as you could see on the site plans. Is the commission satisfied with that information and willing to waive the requirement for the soils report? Or does the commission believe that the soils report is necessary for reviewing this application?
The language in the regs say,
1 minute. The following are also required unless otherwise determined by the agency or its duly authorized agent. Original soils report signed by the soil scientist. Wetlands shall be delineated and flagged in the field by a qualified soil scientist and be located and incorporated onto the plans by a licensed land surveyor. That has been done. Soils mapped are to be consistent with the categories established by the National Cooperative Soil Survey of the U.S. Natural Resource Conservation Service. So what we have not received is essentially the soil scientists report, where they go over the soils that were observed on site and maybe into some details regarding vegetation and things like that. But we do have the physical
delineation
boundaries of the wetland.
I'm okay with where we're at.
Can we have general consensus, or?
Does anybody feel we need something different than what we already have?
Commissioner Reynolds, no, I'm fine.
Silence from the
Okay.
rest of the commission. I think you got your answer, Jamie.
All right, so the outstanding question is the mitigation requirement,
Correct.
which can be continued at the next meeting. And then just one last thing, general site compliance. This property is owned by two condo associations, Island View Village 2 and Island View Village 1. We're currently talking with Island View Village 2. Island View Village 1 somewhat recently has done some drainage improvements. So it'd be a different group of people, but because it's the same parcel, I feel that it's appropriate to bring it up at this time. They've recently done some drainage improvements that tie into a drainage system that outlets to a water course. So my question for the commission is whether or not that activity requires an inland wetland permit application, which would be separate from this current application that we're talking about if it is. So
why wouldn't it?
I just want confirmation before I continue forward. All the work has been done. But what they've done is they've tied in some of the roof leaders into this drainage that it's a, I believe it's a French drain, if I remember correctly. And it ties into a catch basin, which ultimately discharges to a head wall, which flows into a water course. So should I follow up with Island View Village 1 and tell them they should submit an after the fact application?
I mean, I think that's been our practice. If we turn around and say, well, it's already done, no, then we know what we're inciting.
Right. So I just wanted to make sure, because I personally have not dealt with something of this scope on a condo property. So I told them that it was likely that they were going to have to submit an application, but that I would check with the commission first. So I will follow up with them.
And by the way, I don't mean to speak for the commission. If you feel differently, now's the time.
This is
It would be
Commissioner
nice to have a
Papantonis.
general
I would have said the
consensus.
same thing. Submit an application.
Okay. Anything more on that?
Next
You're good,
meeting.
right? All right, question for the commission. We're about to hit item 6. We can either push through to the end or take a 10-minute break. What's your pleasure?
I would prefer to finish and let's get it done unless somebody wants to take a break.
I could push through, Commissioner
through? Okay.
The
Papantonis.
rest should be fairly quick, hopefully, knock on wood.
Item 6, jurisdictional review, pardon me, jurisdictional ruling request, 93 Bradley Street, maintenance of a path road.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, just to kind of remind the commission on this. This started off with a notice of violation that was issued as some crushed stone had recently been placed along what had historically been a road based on looking at old plans. There was a minor change in the layout with a turnaround, if you will, at the end. I did issue a notice of violation. The commission reviewed that and requested that a jurisdictional ruling request be submitted with the understanding that the activity was probably done with the assumption that they did not need a permit. So that ruling request has been submitted. We have received some correspondence from adjoining owners that activity may have extended onto. As far as ownership, I think that really only comes into play with an application and or an enforcement action. Not so much with the jurisdictional ruling request. So I believe there is a representative of the property owner that submitted the jurisdictional ruling request present. And I can hand it over to him to provide an overview of what they're requesting and their provided rationale.
You have the floor, sir. You're muted.
They may have thought we took the 10-minute break.
There you go.
Can you hear me now?
I can. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm a dinosaur when it comes to a computer. Sorry. Jamie, can you bring up the Dropbox?
What specifically did you want?
I want you to bring up the last one, the topographical map, the last item on the Dropbox. For the record, my name is William Caldwell. I'm an attorney in Hamden, and I represent the Maturo family. And I've represented the Maturo family since the late 1970s. As you can see on this map, home place comes and ends at right where there is a wetland area. Jamie's pointing that out. The Maturo family has two locations. Jamie, I don't know if you can point to there, right there. That's the old homestead, and that's the other Maturo family land. The family came here about 100 years ago. Charlie and John, two brothers, were developers in the town. They developed a Victoria Drive, named after their mother, Victoria. They developed Home Place. And as they were developing Home Place, they needed rock in order for the roads. So they went to the very end of Home Place, and there was rock at that point. Where there's wetlands now, there used to be a big rock foundation. So they dug out the rock, and they used the rock for the gravel to create Home Place. Part of creating that, taking the gravel, was that there was now a crater there, and Mother Nature found a crater, and over time, that is now a wetland area. It wasn't a wetland area 100 years ago, but it is now. So can you now go to item number, your third item on the Dropbox, the approximate 100 feet from wetland sketch area? Right. So as you can see, Home Place ends and there's a wetlands. To the right side, there's a dotted line, and that is a roadway, which is a direct roadway back in the 1950s and 60s and 70s, which went from the Maturo property up on Bradley Street down to what at that point was Bob Maddox Chevrolet. Any of you have been Branford for a period of time, you'd recognize that. Bob Maddox then became Tom Chevrolet. At one point, it was a Subaru dealership. And then when they were refurbishing Blackstone Library, that became your library. At some point in time in the mid-1990s, it was given a long-term lease to Stop and Shop Corporation, and they eventually tore down the buildings that were there. But that dotted line that Jamie just identified was a dirt road, was a graveled road, and part of it was a paved road. And I can tell you personal experience that I have been in motor vehicles that have gone down that road and gone up that road back in the 90s and the 2000s. So if you go to the top of the map there, you can see dotted line, and to the left of the dotted line is a box, which is 43 Home Place. So this graveled line goes all the way back another, probably 300 yards back to the homestead. And every so often the gravel becomes deteriorating, and so the family re-gravels the property. This time it was re-graveled, and then that created the issue. So what we believe that we are grandfathered in. We believe that section 4.1C allows us to gravel that walkway, that driveway, the pathway, as we have done so in the last 50, 60 years. 4.1C says that its use is incidental to the enjoyment and maintenance of residential property. Such uses may include maintenance of existing structures and landscaping. We also think that we comply with your requirements in the 4.2B, and that you're encouraging outdoor recreation, including field trails. This property is actively walked. It is actually beautiful, and it's not driven anymore, except I will tell you, there are some times when the Branford Fire Department does in fact use that road to get to by the railroad tracks, because there frequently are sparks which cause fire, and the Branford Fire Department has used this area, this road, to put out fires by the railroad tracks. But we believe that the history shows that this is a property that we've maintained and used over the many, many years. It actually predates the zoning, the Wetlands Commission creation, and it quite frankly predates the fact that there was no wetlands there 100 years ago. But there is now, we understand that. And so we're just looking for, just want to be acknowledged that we're grandfathered in because of the history of what we've done.
Is there a specific part of the regulations that talk about grandfathering, Jamie?
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent. So as was acknowledged, obviously, the fact that it's a wetland now, the wetland is a regulated area. I think as far as grandfathering, that could relate to an argument relative to 4.1C, which was referenced. I think one thing that is to note is it says uses incidental to the enjoyment and maintenance of residential property. And the terminus of this road is on commercial property. Such property defined as equal to or smaller than the largest minimum residential lot permitted anywhere in the municipality and containing a residence. Such incidental uses shall include maintenance of existing structures and landscaping, which could be a grandfathering scenario, but shall not include removal or deposition of substantial amounts of material from or into the wetland or watercourse, or diversion or alteration of a watercourse.
For the record, the lower half of this road doesn't exist anymore. There's no way to take this road down to Route 1 anymore. All the rock that was on Route 1 has now been removed, or in the process of being removed, for the new Aldi supermarket, and a bank is going to go there. So the road essentially ends at the very top of the land. It doesn't go down to Route 1 anymore. It's gone.
I guess I don't know. I don't see anything in F 4.1C that specifically addresses grandfather.
Well, Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent. So it says maintenance of existing structures and landscaping. So I think that could be
But then there's the big but.
Yeah, but then there also it says incidental to the enjoyment and maintenance of residential property, such property defined as blah, blah, blah. I mean, they're arguing that the use of the road is for residential property. However, the fact that it extends, I don't know. I mean, perhaps this is something the commission wants to seek clarification from town council on, or guidance from town council on. And I think the commission needs to keep in mind, I mean, if it is as of right or non-permitted, then the commission, if the commission makes that determination, they make that determination. But also if you make that determination, that means that the continued activity would obviously be also fall within that determination. So seeing as it's already happened and at this point it's stable, I don't think that the impact is changing. And I mean, I know this has been on the agenda for a while, but perhaps the commission can outline some of the concerns and seek further guidance and or direct staff to further things you want us to clarify. Since it sounds like the commission doesn't immediately have a clear decision on this.
Yeah, I do not at this point. I guess, would a site walk help here at all, Jamie?
I think that's up to the commission. And also, as this is a jurisdictional ruling request, I think we would need to confirm access for that. And that might also get into the question of property ownership, because we don't want to be going on private property that the commission doesn't have approval to go on.
Right.
Jamie, could you go to the Dropbox to the third to last bottom one, the one that has photos on it? The next photo. Like just another one. That's it. So what you see on the left is the fence on the property at 43 Home Place, and you can see the path that the gravel. It's a gravel path. The owner of 43 Home Place is claiming that the fence is not the boundary line fence, but that their boundary line actually extends into and a part of it on the other side of the gravel. So there is an issue as to ownership. There's also an issue as to the concept called adverse possession, having used that property for years and years and years. So there is a Superior Court issue. But I don't think that's pertinent in front of the commission. But you can see the gravel that was put down there this past fall. It was gravel upon other ground. There was gravel there before. This is not new gravel.
Yeah, and the wetland, Jamie, is where?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. The wetland, so if you travel down this roadway and it's clear that there's fresh stone, but it is also clear that there is an edging and that there has historically been some sort of road in that location. As far as the placement of stone, I don't know. But so this is, you can see the corner of the fence, which could theoretically be the corner of the subject property, but it's certainly near the edge of the property. And it looks like it continues on to 1151 West Main Street, which is the property with the subject wetlands. And so this is where the path kind of splits. And in one of the materials submitted by the Materos, they stated that turnaround was added because the path is no longer a throughway, so that vehicles could turn around. So I think there's certainly room to, I mean, so that would have been a while ago. We don't have any documentation on a map specifying when it happened. But I believe in the materials, they did reference an approximate date. I don't recall off the top of my head. So
this thing has got a lot of hair on it. I think we're going to need some advice from council, and at least at this point, it to me is worth a site walk if the property owners would agree.
You certainly have my client's permission to go on that property.
Thank you. I understand. Yep. May not be all we need.
I know. But as I've mentioned before, there is a claim by the owner of 43 Home Place that she owns either all or some of that gravelled area.
Mhm.
If the commission is interested in setting a site walk, we could do it contingent upon town council being satisfied that we have the appropriate authorization to conduct
Yeah,
said site walk.
that's a good point. Let's wait till we get town council comment. And then if things are clear, we then look for all of the property owners involved to acknowledge that we could have a site walk.
Or
Let's not get the cart before the horse.
Okay, so you want to hold off on scheduling one until we
Right.
have confirmation, or
Right.
do you want to? Okay,
Right, to make sure that, we're within our rights.
I mean, that could also just continue to push this down and down and down the road. So if you want, we can pick a date and have it and say it's contingent upon having the proper authorization to the satisfaction of town council. And we'll update the commission as to whether or not it's actually happening.
Yeah, I just as soon get the town council and then we'll circle the wagons and figure out where we want to go from there.
This is Commissioner Papantonis. I just want to make the comment that right now it's dark at like 4:30, so a site walk's going to take a little time anyway.
Right.
It'll probably have to be a weekend.
Yeah, it'd have to be a weekend and, this is a lot going on this time of year, so let's wait till we
Soon
get
everything
town
will be
council.
covered in snow.
Yeah, right.
Commissioner, this is Commissioner Begeman. One of the questions I would have is, they've been putting gravel for years and years, but what would prevent them from putting a different surface on there? Well,
Sorry, this is William Caldwell. I don't know the answer. Again, it has been a dark gray gravel before. I did ask the question. I'm sorry. I did ask the question of my client, and I was told that they had access to this colored rock and they thought it was pretty, so they put it down.
I think, Commissioner Begeman, I think that for our in the wetlands concerns, if that would be something to look at in terms of what could happen to this road or whatever it is in the future. I don't know if we can control that or not, but that would be obviously putting a paved asphalt road in there would really change things.
Yeah, we're not asking for that.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. I think if the commission were to make a ruling that this was either as of right or non-regulated use, that certainly you could indicate as part of that finding that it's based on, the current road surface, and that a different road surface would need to be reviewed separately and may require a permit.
But Commissioner Begeman raises a legitimate concern.
Absolutely, but I think that could be specified in the decision, should the commission decide that it's not a regulated use that requires a permit.
William Caldwell again. The applicant would accept a provision that said we couldn't do anything more to that property without coming back and getting your permission?
I'm sorry?
We would be willing to accept a restriction of some sort to say that if they were going to put gravel down on there 2 or 3 or 4 years from now, that we wouldn't do so without your permission.
Okay, well, unless there's anything else on this, I think we have a plan that basically says we need some additional advice. And then we'll decide whether a physical review of the road is warranted and go from there.
Very good. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, we've got some enforcement actions. Notice of violation. I think we just touched on that note, or is there something more on this?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, since you tabled the jurisdictional ruling request, I would say it'd be appropriate to table the notice of violation as well.
So noted. Cease and correct 210301, 143 Ivy Street. Earth disturbance, drainage and vegetation removal within the upland review area. That's been around obviously for a little while, and there's been a request to lift it.
Jamie Frederick, inland wetland agent. The request was actually received a while back when the owner had completed the activity that was required of them. We were still waiting on the town to repair the curbing along the road to help prevent the road drainage from coming in and disturbing the area of concern. I have inspected, the curbing has been installed. When I went out to install, somebody had thought it was a good idea to place the hay bales adjacent to the wetland to dispose of them. So I contacted the management company. They were very upset to hear that. The hay bales were immediately removed. So I'm bringing it to the commission as a recommendation to lift the order. I can share a couple of pictures real quick. What they had done was they had installed drainage across the driveway here. There is a wetland area over here, and they have an infiltration or a dry well over here. So everything is stabilized, everything's revegetated at this point. This is the area where the hay bales had been placed. They've been removed, so I'm satisfied with that. It would be my recommendation that the commission lift the cease and correct order.
Does any commissioner feel that it warrants remaining to remain the cease and correct, or is everybody comfortable in lifting it?
Commissioner Begman, I'm comfortable with lifting it.
Is that the general feeling on the commission?
Should be an actual motion, please.
Oh, we need an actual motion. All right. Commissioner Begman, why don't you take care of that?
Can you give me some numbers that I can put into a motion?
Let me pull up the agenda real quick.
Okay. Okay, it's 143 Ivy Street, right?
Yep.
Okay. Mr. Begman, make a motion that we lift the cease and correct order number 210301, 143 Ivy Street.
Commissioner Papantonis, second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstain? Great. Other business. Inland wetland 141102, phase 1. And inland wetland 170705, phase 2. 250 North Main, 2-pad retail development. You got a monitoring report, Jamie?
Yes, so Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. So there's 2 phases to this development. The first phase is in year 5 of reporting, which is theoretically the last year of reporting. And the second phase is in year 3. I did bring this to the commission a little while back. The permit holder was in the process of removing invasive species to try and to comply with the invasive species removal part of the application, and also to try and get a better count on the number of plants. And so we did get an updated report. The phase 1 is below the 85% survival requirement, I believe, by 5 plants, if I remember correctly off the top of my head. Phase 1 is immediately adjacent to phase 2 mitigation areas. So I don't know if the commission wants to require that the plantings from phase 1 be replaced as needed to get to the 85%, and then maybe leave it at the invasive species monitoring and removal moving forward, or the report did indicate that there is a decent amount of volunteer plants, specifically alder, and I believe willow, that are have that are on site. I'm not sure if the botanist is present or not this evening to speak to her findings. But I believe a representative from BL Companies is present. If they have any comments, there was also an erosion controls concern within the phase 2 monitoring area, which has been addressed. So I think just providing clear guidance for the applicant moving forward on what is expected as they hopefully are wrapping up this monitoring period.
Before, this Commissioner Bassman, before turning it over to Mr. Schmitz, in our practice, if we have 100 plants and the idea is that 85 survive, if let's say 70 survived, all right, the monitoring report per the permit is for how long?
So it does vary a little bit from application or permit to permit, but it's usually for 5 years.
Yeah.
And usually we have language that says, or can be extended as needed up to the life of the permit.
So, but my question is, I guess for those 15 that didn't survive, that let's say we plan again, does the clock start on those for an additional 5, or how does that all work?
So ideally, those plants would be replaced earlier in the process, I would think. I don't think that the survival threshold is low enough that we really need to reset the clock. But I do think that the commission would certainly be within their rights to say that at this point they should replant so that they have the 85% survival. And then kind of
that would seem to be a minimum if the 85% has any teeth in it.
Yeah, so I think due to changes in staff and what have you, the monitoring reports haven't been necessarily reviewed in as much detail as might have been ideal. So certainly, I know from my vantage point, I've been focusing on trying to get the invasive species managed because they're going to be what provides the space for the plantings to survive. If they're being overshadowed by the invasive species, then the plantings don't really stand a chance. So I don't know that you need to reset the clock on 5 plants, especially when there's native volunteer species also presenting themselves. Just my thought on it.
Okay, I understand now. Thank you.
And we can try and pay more attention moving forward with phase 2 to make sure they're addressed earlier so that hopefully by year 5, they're compliant with 85%.
Mr. Schmitz, any issue with replacing the 5 plants?
My understanding is that some native things are taking the place of those 5 plants that are good plants to have. Is that basically what you're saying, Abby? That's Commissioner Bagman.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. I don't know specifically where on the site, but yes, in the monitoring report, the botanist had indicated that there are volunteer species in the area of concern. So there are plants, favorable plants filling in that area. So, I mean, that's part of the reason why 85% versus 100%, because there is going to be other stuff that comes in. I think the main concern is just making sure the area doesn't become constantly overtaken by invasive species. So they need to stay on top of that routinely, particularly for the remainder of the monitoring. So that way, what they've invested in planting can really take hold and thrive and provide the beneficial wetland corridor that they were presenting in their application. And, you know, also, I'm sure provides an aesthetic advantage for the site as well. I don't think everyone enjoys looking at invasive species, so benefits for the wetlands and also for the property owner as well. So if the commission doesn't have any additional comments or questions, I don't know if the representative for the property has any questions or comments or concerns.
This is John Schmitz for the applicant, civil engineer with BL Companies, 355 Research Parkway, Meriden, Connecticut. No, I think the way you described it was very accurate. I'm actually pinch hitting tonight for Jennifer Bino, who's our biologist with Soil Science and Environmental Services. She was called away on a family emergency late tonight and actually sent me a text and said she wasn't going to be able to join us. So I'm just kind of here to fill in, answer any questions. She did prepare the report. We were out there, she was out there a couple of times this year, I think in August initially to do the monitoring for both phase 1 and phase 2. There's quite a bit of invasive species that was in the way. And so that material was cleared away so that she could get it out there and take another look. She was out there in November and was able to get a more accurate count. She did note the volunteer species that was there and completed a final report that she issued. Again, and just to put it in perspective, so phase 1 is approximately about 3,800 square feet mitigation area. And the phase 2 area is about almost 21,000 square feet. So quite a bit larger on the phase 2 area. And we still have 2 more years to go with the reports for that area. And we'll certainly be looking to, pay closer attention to the invasives. It's been an ongoing battle through the years as they continue to encroach on the site every year. But I think the way that Jamie explained things was very accurate.
Jamie Frederick in the wetland agent. I thought I had a reference material. So just real quick for the commission. Phase 1 area is this highlighted blue dark area on the front, immediately adjacent to the wetland. And then this large area here is the phase 2 mitigation area. And then these 2 orange highlight areas are the 2 upland planting areas that were also part of phase 2. So certainly a majority of the mitigation area is in phase 2. I think if they replace the missing plants in phase 1 and continue to maintain the invasives, it should be in pretty good shape. So yes, it is 5 plants under in phase 1. Also noting that these upland areas are short by a plant as well. So it'd probably be a good idea for that to get planted as well. And then there were a couple of other recommendations in Benno's report that should be followed through on as well, such as a lot of the invasive species were cut and a lot of them were removed, but there are some that were cut and left in place, and that biomass should be removed to help reduce seed bank and allow for ideally, hopefully, some beneficial native vegetation to come in those areas. So I think with those replacement plantings and then just continuing to stay on top of things for the next couple of years, it should turn out pretty good.
The applicant is comfortable with that recommendation?
This is John Schmitz, BL. Yes, we certainly replant those and continue to monitor. Just quickly, I know Jamie did mention there was an erosion control issue. It was resolved. It was at the far end of one of the upland areas. The slope was restabilized and some erosion control matting was put down. And I think in the spring, we'll probably be back to just make sure that we can get some new plantings to take up in that area.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
You got what you need, Jamie? Okay. Inland Wetland 191001, 21 Summit Place, multi-story building with community center and parking. Again, a monitoring report. And permit condition number 2. Assess compliance.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. So the first year monitoring report was received. It was very positive. I won't go through it with the commission. It is available in the Dropbox if the commission wants to look at it. Let staff know if you have any questions. We can touch base. If anyone thinks it needs to come back, we can. But I didn't see any issues. I did put assess compliance with permit condition number 2 monitoring reports. I had that on there before I'd actually had a chance to look at the monitoring report. I didn't see anything of concern. So it's kind of more of an update. Does the commission want me to generally inform you when I receive a monitoring report, or do you only want me to inform you if I find that there's something unsatisfactory in the report?
Commissioners?
I say, Commissioner Begeman, I say only if there's a problem.
I agree.
Okay.
I agree.
Good.
I agree.
All right, regulation fee subcommittee report. We had good intentions some time ago of forming a subcommittee to address specifically fees that are in our regulations and which of the fees need to be adjusted. Staff did quite a bit of work looking at areas adjacent to us in terms of their fees. We had some definitional issues for the 2 members that were on the subcommittee. And as we were closing the gap on our differences, one of the commissioners was tied up at work and could no longer perform as a commissioner. So at this point in time, we have some ideas of what we want to do with the fees, but we don't have a process to bring that to fruition other than presenting that material to the full commission, and again, have them decide whether it's close enough and be able to make a decision as a full commission, or whether more work is required. And I was hoping to be able to provide that information to the commission this evening, but I got tied up last week and didn't get that done. So I'd like to move that to the January meeting regarding the fees and a consolidation of the work that had been done. But there's also, I think, a bigger question for the commission as they think of this, that we have other areas in the regulation that require attention, and how we want to deal with those regulation changes, because it's going to take some time, and whether we want to do that as a full commission, whether we want to do that again as a subcommittee, is from a process standpoint, something that we ought to discuss. So I'm hopeful that we can do that at the January meeting if there is sufficient time on the agenda. Jamie, you want to add your 2 cents to this whole process?
So part of the fee revision, or sorry, regulation revision process is that the commission has to come up with the revised language and then submit it to DEEP at least 35 days prior to opening a public hearing to consider adopting those regulations. So it is a time-sensitive process in a sense, and it's timely process, time-taking process. So I think that the sooner the commission can kind of move forward with some of these changes, the better. Been trying to revise the fees for about a year now. There have been some statutory changes that we should include in our regulations. And I know that there's been some recommendations that we modify some things to accommodate MS4 permit requirements. And then also the public has generally requested that we take a look at bond requirements. So we do have quite a bit on the table. Hopefully at the January meeting, we can kind of touch base on it a bit and decide if maybe the commission wants to schedule a special meeting to specifically talk about some of these revisions, or if it's something the commission wants to try and add on to a regularly scheduled meeting, but they run quite late. So
Commissioner Begeman, I feel like today's was really long, and who knows what January's will be, but, and in as much as I don't like adding in extra meetings, I think there are enough new commissioners that it would probably be worth having a special meeting to talk about bonds and talk about the fees and, you know, and get some understanding, so that then when we have to talk about something like a bond or a fee that pertains to a specific project, we all feel comfortable that we know what we're talking about. I've abstained on the bonds, because I just kind of get lost in the numbers and why it's reduced or why. Anyhow, so that would be my thinking. If we happen to have a really short agenda in January, let's go for it. But if we don't, I think we should probably think about a January special meeting date.
Okay.
For me, it was Commissioner Bassman, for me, it's a different orientation when you're talking about regulations and looking at kind of a bigger picture than individual applications. And your head can't be jumping back and forth between the two and do justice to that broader picture, I believe. So I can't see a short agenda in January or February. My guess is we're going to need to have a special meeting, and how to schedule that with the appropriate material to have had to prepare for that meeting becomes the issue in my mind. So.
Well, with the holidays, Commissioner Greenwich, with the holidays and everything, I think we should not schedule any special meeting prior to the next January meeting.
Oh, I certainly agree with you. I think we got one already teed up.
We got one already, so that's right.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is going to be a 10-minute meeting to make up for tonight.
Yeah, we won't add anything. We won't add anything.
Right. Commissioner Papantones, I can't see the special meeting on bonding and fees and things being a 10-minute meeting.
No, that one won't be.
No, that one, no. Yeah.
No,
And I love the way we talk about it as a meeting.
I was
Multiple meetings.
referring to the meeting that we're having with
Right, that was, he was using a little leverage on the 10-minute commitment that we had talked about.
Commissioner Melissa, yeah, I had a question. What is the bond? So that would be helpful for me. And what time do the meetings go to usually?
Well, they've been pretty late of late.
Okay.
I don't think
There's
we've
no
gotten
time
through.
limit.
I don't think we've gotten through before 10 for the last, 4 or 5 meetings.
Okay.
It depends on how many
that when you signed up,
there
huh?
are.
Has there ever been discussion of meeting a little earlier? So my bedtime's 9:30, 10. So.
Yeah.
The commission used to meet at 7:30, so. But certainly that's, so the agenda or the meeting schedule for 2022 has been filed, but if there's a general consensus among the commission, especially now that we do have, some new commissioners, that there needs to be some modification to when we're meeting, that's something that could be possibly considered. And the commission can also try to, I know some meeting at the firehouse now, they don't have cutoff time frame for kicking us out. So there really is no cutoff date time.
All right, last up, correspondence and announcements in the wetland agent letter regarding 125 Short Beach.
So 125 Short Beach is open space property owned by the Branford Land Trust. I was made aware of some historical, essentially dumping of primarily like lawn debris, like leaves and some disposed tree materials, so wood chips essentially. By the time I saw it, it wasn't very clear what the extent was, when it had happened. My main concern was making sure that additional material didn't get placed there. So I did issue a letter to the land trust as the property owner, and I CC'd the adjacent property owner because it looked like access might have been through their property. So I just wanted to make sure they're aware that dumping of material, even natural debris, within or adjacent to a wetland or watercourse is a regulated activity and should not occur without proper approval. And I referenced the leaf pickup schedule that the town has. So that hopefully that won't be an issue again. And I'm from the land trust that if they do experience any other issues, that they can reach out to me as it relates to wetlands and watercourses.
Okay. That concludes our meeting of December 9th, That
I'll
has been
make-
noted
I'll
that
make
it's
the last
10:47.
motion.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the last motion to adjourn.
And a second?
Second.
Second, that was,
Turn it.
Good night, everybody.
good night,
Commissioner
everybody.
Papadopoulos.
Have a great holiday.
Good night, happy
We'll
holidays.
see you in a
Happy
week and a
holidays,
half.
all.
Yeah, we can have, right. I'll get a chance to say that again, right? Good night.
Good night.
This program was brought to you in part through the support of the Town of Branford. Watch town meetings and other videos on demand at BranfordTV.org.